Chapter 1569. It was like a ray of light piercing through the darkness. But in fact, under the illumination of the three suns, the light was so bright that people had to squint their eyes. In the center of the forehead of the will of Libra, blood started to flow out of the small hole. The blood flowed down the forehead and slowly separated on the bridge of the nose. Finally, the blood gathered at the chin of this delicate face. It dripped down. It was still red. The eyes of the will of Libra widened, as if it was asking something. Why? The girl's body fell from the shoulder of the goddess statue under everyone's confused and shocked gaze. At the same time, the arms of the goddess statue instantly shattered. The three sons of Pharaoh, Siegetu, and Manlana finally swallowed the entire goddess statue. Then, the light swallowed everything here, turning the world into pure white. It was not that there was no dust, but there was no dust to be seen. After the extreme white there was darkness. The sight that slowly recovered was dim at first. It needed some time to adapt. The square was filled with a mixture of broken stones and sand, and dust filled the air. The statue of the goddess had completely collapsed. Only the head was intact, but half of it was buried in the sand. A human head poked out from the sand and stones, spitting out a mouthful of sand and dust. It was Ibn. He struggled to crawl out from the sand like a groundhog. He successfully crawled out and looked around, but he didn't see anyone. Ibn turned pale with fright and called out to the others. In the end, he found the night watcher, Mr. Otto, in front of the head of the goddess statue. He also found the princess who fired the last shot, the little maid Elaine, and the flying curtain. The genie had returned, and he looked very tired, leaning on a rock weakly. Is it over? Ibn quickly walked in front of the genie and asked carefully. Mr. Otto shook his head and looked up at the sky. In the sky, a bright light ball was slowly descending. It was Manlana, Pharaoh, and Siegetu. Pharaoh and Siegetu had lost their ability to move, and they were only supported by Manlana's power. They were gently placed on the soft sand. Manlana lowered her head and glanced at Sphnx cat. Then, she glanced at Siegetu. Finally, she raised her head and stared at Sphnx cat. Everyone followed third Amanlana's line of sight and saw a figure suddenly rushing out from the sand. It was the will of Libra. The will of Libra had many wounds all over her body, but the most eye-catching one was still the gunshot wound on her forehead. Her right leg was broken, and her left hand was missing as well. Like a banshee who had revealed her true face, her cute face was no longer there, and a crazed look appeared. She dragged her broken leg and moved forward step by step. Her right hand reached towards the third Yamana as if she wanted to grab her. The ground was filled with the marks she left behind as she moved forward. Seeing that Libra's will was still alive, Ibn was so scared that he quickly hid behind Mr. Otto. The genie of lamp, who was sitting on the ground, frowned and stood up. But Mr. Otto stretched out his hand and said, "Wait." The will of Libra didn't care about the others. It dragged its body and walked straight towards Yamanlana. It was slow, but it was very straight. She took a few steps forward and suddenly fell to the ground. She continued to crawl and finally succeeded in reaching the third Yamana. But she was too weak to get up. She just grabbed the third Yamana's leg tightly. Then, her tight fingers gradually loosened. The will of Libra's face was finally buried in the sand and didn't move for a long time. What a terrifying obsession! Mr. Ao sighed slowly. In his long life, he had seen a lot of similar things. Just like those soldiers on the battlefield who were obviously dead but still relied on weapons to support their bodies. Of course, the will of Libra couldn't be compared with those soldiers on the battlefield, whether it was in terms of existence or purpose. But this obsession still moved Mr. Otto. Will she suddenly get up again? Ibn swallowed his saliva and said with a trembling voice, "Should we stab her a few more times, to be safe? She is already dead. There is no need to insult her body." Hearing that, the third Yamana coldly glanced at Ibn. Her golden left eye flashed, full of majesty. At this time, a silver-white light slowly floated out from the girl's back. When Yamanana saw this, she reached out her hand and grabbed the light. She looked up at the forehead of the goddess statue. There, Yamanana's body was still embedded in the statue. However, she had already fainted, but her hands were still holding the scales of good and evil. The third Yamana waved her hand and directly shattered the head of the goddess statue. Yamana's body slowly floated down and lay down next to the will of Libra. The third Yamana reached out her hand again. The scales of good and evil fell from Yamana's hands and flew into her hands. Mr. Otto frowned at this moment. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but he could only stay silent. Only the princess was walking toward third Amanlana with a pistol in her hand. What will happen next? Everyone couldn't help but feel anxious. Although the will of Libra was dealt with, the scales of good and evil fell into the hands of the third Yamana. And now the princess was walking towards her. It seemed like the matter between them was not over yet. The princess finally came to the front of the third Yamana. She stared at her and slowly said, "If I look at her, I feel like I am standing in front of a mirror. But when I stand here, what I see is a stranger." The third Yamana said indifferently, "Because you and she are using two similar models. As for me, I am a different model. My life is different from most of those who have died." "We? What are we?" the princess asked in a low voice. "The division of good and evil. It is only the division of good and evil, but why are there so many of us?" The third Yamana sighed and said, "Although the division of good and evil is no different from humans, it is just sand after all. If your mother turned into sand, how could she give birth to you?" The princess's pupils contracted slightly. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. The answer faintly appeared in her heart. The third Yamana directly revealed the answer. The will of Libra was cultivated by the goddess genes, so are we. It's just that we have Siejatu's genes in our bodies. So strictly speaking, we are indeed his daughters. The first one? The princess frowned. The third Yamana sighed and said, "She died in the first vessel inheritance. The earliest body there is her. But her gene sample is still there, and there is a place at the bottom of the tomb that is used to cultivate us. You and I are just the first batch." The princess smiled. It was a very funny and sad smile. She looked at Siejatu on the ground and said with a bitter smile, "In the end, he still succeeded. This man." That was indeed the case. The will of Libra had been destroyed, and the rebellious thoughts that were born from the good and evil Libra had been destroyed. Only the original will of the good and evil Libra was left. Yamlana had the power of both Horus and Seth. Not only did she defeat the perfect vessel Yamlana, she had also obtained the good and evil Libra. "What do you plan to do?" The princess was silent for a moment. "Do you want to fulfill this man's wish to create a world without sorrow?" This was what Siejatu wanted. The princess didn't believe that this wish was fabricated by the will of Libra. When were humans the easiest to be tempted? When there was obsession in people's hearts, they were the easiest to be tempted. He might have thought about it before, and that was why under the influence of the will of Libra, the image of a Seth appeared. All of this should end. The third Yamana looked at the princess deeply. The power of the Libra doesn't belong to humans. It's unrealistic to try to use it to eliminate the sorrow in the world. It should be sealed forever or even destroyed. The fate of humans shouldn't be controlled by the hands of God. The princess was stunned. She looked at the third Yamana and opened her mouth. This is the reason why you failed?" The two light doors were the final test to become a vessel. The princess, who had experienced this test, now understood that this final test was to be able to give up freedom for justice, to give up oneself to protect the people. This was the so-called giving up oneself to achieve the greater good. Those who had died and were once prepared vessels, They probably failed for various reasons. However, the third Yamana in front of her had denied the existence of God from the bottom of her heart. "It doesn't matter anymore," the third Yamana said calmly. "I just want to end all of this." The princess didn't know why, but she was suddenly shocked. She hurriedly asked, "What do you want to do?" At this moment, Yamanlana's body slowly rose up. Holding the scales of good and evil in her hand, her body suddenly burst out a dazzling light and turned into a sun again. Then, a touch of darkness appeared in this sun and expanded. It moved, the sand and stones moved. As if they were attracted by something, they slowly floated up. They were attracted by the huge black light ball. A strong attraction force attracted everyone's body at the same time. What does she want to do? Ivan was shocked. In the sky, under the black light ball, the third Yamana's voice slowly sounded. "The end is destruction. Sun City shouldn't exist." Everything was attracted by this black light ball. It was like a black hole that devoured everything. Spynx cat and Siejiatu's bodies slowly floated up under the influence of this attraction force and moved toward the black hole in the sky. The will of Libra and Yamana's body were the same at this time. The huge attraction force attracted Mr. Otto, Yalan, and Ivan's body. The lamp god's face changed slightly. He quickly reached out and grabbed the little maid Yalan, who was about to fly away. But at this time, the lamp god's body also flew up from the ground. The magical power of the magic lamp became ridiculously weak under the influence of a higher level of divine power. Finally, the princess also flew toward the black hole in the sky under the influence of this attraction force. Not only them, but the entire Sun City. Starting from the temple in the center of the palace, everything began to collapse. Everything was swallowed by the black hole in the sky. The living people in the Sun City fell to the ground one after another. Their bodies began to turn into sand, and the sand was finally absorbed by the black hole in the sky. The ground cracked, and this huge desert city was dug out from the desert. A scene comparable to the end of the world unfolded in front of Otto's eyes. He once again felt the insignificance of being born as a human. However, in the lands of the Far East, there was a group of people who, with the bodies of mortals, could stand shoulder to shoulder with the power of gods. Xian Yuan. Taking a deep breath, Otto, who would never wait for death, solemnly reached into his pocket and took out something, a dragon-patterned jade pendant. This was an item given to him by the person surnamed Xian Yuan he had saved. The training of qi was something that the person surnamed Xian Yuan casually taught him. It was not something that belonged to the Xian Yuan clan. It was an ordinary breathing technique that only a small number of warriors in the world knew. For the person surnamed Xian Yuan, this could not be considered a repayment. This dragon-patterned jade pendant has the power of my family. It may save your life in the most dangerous time. From now on, we are even. If we meet again in the future, we still don't know each other. Over the years, Otto wandered in all kinds of dangerous areas, looking for a way to resurrect the dead queen. He almost died several times, but he was reluctant to use this dragon-patterned jade pendant. Now, facing the third Yamanlana, even the once arrogant genie couldn't do anything. Mr. Otto had to take out this dragon-patterned jade pendant. The method to use it was taught by the person who gave it to him. Although it was 100 years ago, Otto still remembered it clearly. At this time, Mr. Otto bit his finger, and directly wiped the dragon-patterned jade pendant with his blood-stained finger. His qi condensed in his finger, trying to stimulate the power of the dragon pendant. I hope it works. Mr. Otto felt a strange vibration from the dragon pendant, but he didn't relax. Instead, he became more nervous. I have no backup plan. A golden light suddenly shot out from the dragon-patterned jade pendant, and the jade pendant was directly broken at this moment. Oh, this is the power of Ms. Long in Yunwu City, on the sentry tower that was used to defend against the desert beasts. The boss in the royal guard uniform looked up at the golden light and blinked. The boss was about to raise his hand, but now he put it down. The world is really wonderful. The golden light was like a sharp flying arrow, directly hitting the black hole in the air. Chapter 1570. The black hole that swallowed everything, the shattered dragon-patterned jade pendant, the shadow of the golden dragon in the sky. Everything shook, and everything was silent. The moment the golden light from the jade pendant hit the black hole, a reverse pressure instantly dispersed. The entire floating sun city was torn apart at this moment. At the same time, the black hole suddenly shrank and then exploded. They could even feel the air shaking and the angry roar of the lamp god. "Bastard Otto, what did you do?" The voice was then drowned out. Everything was drowned out. Some people said that water controlled time, so time passed by. The sound of water. Where is this? In the darkness, a man's voice sounded. It was Ivan's voice. A drop of water dripped from the rock on his face and woke him up. He didn't know where he was, but he was afraid that he was completely buried by the falling sun city. Though a night watcher, Mr. Otto might be nearby. After all, they were together in the end. Fortunately, even in such a disaster, Ivan didn't suffer any serious injuries. His hands and feet were intact, so they didn't hinder his movement. However, being in the darkness was already very difficult to move. But something was surging in his arms. Light, through his clothes, shot out from his body, illuminating the surroundings. Ivan shivered and quickly took out the thing in his arms. This was something he quietly took out from the coffin goddess when no one was paying attention to him in the tomb. It was a blue gem. The faint blue radiance was being emitted from this blue gem. Although the light was weak, it was enough to illuminate the surroundings. Ivan couldn't help but feel temporarily relieved. It was just that this sapphire was taken out from the goddess corpse. At this time, it was emitting a strange blue luster that was sometimes bright and sometimes dark, which made Ivan feel uneasy for a while. If it weren't for his greedy nature, he wouldn't have the courage to take this gem out from the goddess corpse. "Let me go in this direction?" Ivan stared at the sapphire in his hand at this time. It seemed to have a very obvious reaction to a certain direction, and the brightness was particularly strong. Trapped in the collapsed ruins of Sun City, Ivan was helpless. At this time, although he was afraid, he could only move forward according to the instructions given by this sapphire. As they continued forward, the sapphire's radiance grew brighter and brighter, as if it was about to reach its destination. Ivan finally pushed away a stone slab in front of the road. After pushing away the stone slab, the light scattered and he had no choice but to cover his eyes with his hands. It was the divine temple, the gigantic divine temple in the depths of the palace. It was just that the temple had collapsed at this time, less than half of it. It was surrounded by a terrible pit, and the broken buildings of Sun City could be seen everywhere in the pit. They were either buried in the sand or piled up in a disorderly manner. The darkness underground had been turned over in this disaster and broken. At this time, they gathered at the bottom of the deep pit and gradually covered the remains of the temple. Not long after, the bottom of the deep pit had become a rather large pool. The sapphire in Ivan's hand seemed to want to rush out, but its struggle was not particularly strong. Ivan's hand was barely able to hold it, but the sapphire suddenly exerted its strength and rushed downwards. Ivan, who refused to let go no matter what, could only be dragged into the pit by Sapphire's power. Ah! He fell on top of the ruined temple. Below him was the cold water from the darkness underground. Ivan rolled on the ground to prevent himself from breaking his arms and legs, but he was still in a sorry state. But the sapphire in his hand fell off and rolled on the ground, rolled and then stopped. A slender hand picked up the sapphire at this time. Ivan was stunned. He didn't bother to get up from the ground and quickly looked up. Why are you here?" Ivan was really surprised. The reason for his surprise was that he actually met the young man who had snuck into the palace with him, Otto, and the fake princess at the beginning. He was still wearing the palace guard's uniform at this time. "This sapphire is mine. Why did this guy appear here?" It was not the time to think about this question. The sapphire was not in his hand. Ibn was deeply uneasy at this time. He quickly got up and ran to the young guard, Boss Luo, and said with an unfriendly face, "I picked it up. Do you like wealth?" Boss Luo suddenly asked. "Nonsense." Ibn frowned. "No one hates wealth. Even the most disgusted person is at the level of not hating. They will need it, because they need to eat." Boss Luo nodded and then waved his hand. A pile of scattered stones on the ground suddenly floated up. There were about 50 to 60 of them. These ordinary stones actually emitted a golden luster in Ibn's eyes. Gold. These ordinary stones had actually turned into gold. If they were to be converted into weight, these stones would probably weigh close to 100 kilograms. "If you like wealth, I will use this gold to exchange for the sapphire in your hand," Boss Luo said casually. "Of course, it can be other things. Strictly speaking, this sapphire does not belong to you, but you have the ability to take it out. There will be returns when there is effort." Gold. Ibn's eyes widened. He reached out and grabbed the floating gold closest to him. It was a gold the size of a fist. "These are all real?" Boss Luo smiled. "These are not just gold. As long as they appear in any place with the concept of gold, they will definitely be useful wealth. I promise." Why should I believe you?" Ibn suddenly shivered. He had experienced too much today. Everything was so bizarre. Even if the gold in front of him looked so real, he still could not believe it. "Because I don't lie." Boss Luo smiled casually. "You will believe me, these gold have already exceeded the value of this sapphire. As for the things inside, they are not useful to you." "Oh, okay." Ibn nodded. He instinctively felt that Boss Luo was telling the truth. Between believing and doubting, he chose the former. He held the gold in his arms and asked curiously, "What is this sapphire?" "You will find out later." After that, Luochio took the sapphire and left. He did not disappear in front of Ibn. He just kept moving forward. Ibn widened his eyes. At this moment, he realized that behind this mysterious young man, there was someone else. Third Yamana, Pharaoh, Siegiatu, the princess, Yamana, and the dead Libra's will girl's body. Looking closely, Yamana's body was now filled with tiny cracks. She was like a terracotta statue that was about to break. She had such an exquisite and flawless face. Ibn did not even dare to look at Yamana's eyes. He felt that this was not a gaze that a human should have. It was cold, powerful, and made people tremble like a god. The scales of good and evil was still in Yamana's hands. The light ball that was left after the Libra's will, who destroyed its subjective thoughts, was also in her hand. Siegiatu and Pharaoh's deification had been removed, and they returned to their original appearance. Looking closely, Pharaoh and Siegiatu actually had some similarities. After all, Pharaoh was a life that Siegiatu cultivated with his own genetic fragment. Even if his appearance was modified, their eyes were still so similar. The princess's face was pale, but her face was unyielding. Yamana, who had become a vessel, had also woken up. Her eyes were still as clear as before, but there seemed to be something else. Yamanlana suddenly said, "My body is about to shatter. This body can't withstand the power of Horus and Seth. The person who let me have this power will not allow me to have these two powers that are actually hostile to each other. I'm only single to fulfill my father's wish." When Pharaoh heard this, he sighed with a complicated look in his eyes. "Believe me, Yamarana, I made a wish, but I can't control how it will be fulfilled. It's me. I have two little things. It's not enough for you to stay." Yamanlana shook her head. Not enough? How powerful were the power of Horus and Seth? After all, they were the great gods in the ancient Egyptian civilization, and they were hostile to each other. Now, these two powers were still quietly staying in her body, and it was already a miracle that they didn't bite her back. Her father had used everything he had in exchange for such a miracle. "It's enough." Yamana shook her head. "We're all mortals. For mortals to be able to do this is already an advantage. Without the support of the power of Horus and the Seth, Libra's will would complete the plan that it had planned for 600 years. With the identity of a divine artifact, it would control its owner and achieve the freedom and liberation of its own divine artifact power. Of course, the efforts of Pharaoh and Siegetu, and the appearance of the unknown genie were also involved. Everyone finally defeated Libra's will in the end. Yamana moved her eyes and looked at the young man who was slowly walking toward her. Luochio, who brought her back from the world of death, and there was a hint of gratitude in her eyes. There were some things that even Pharaoh and Siegetu couldn't see or feel, but she, who had the power of two ancient gods, could understand. Pharaoh's deal was obviously not enough to defeat Libra's will, but in the end, Libra's will disappeared. It could only be said that Luochio, who was on the side of the deal, used other methods to make up for the unequal part of the deal. For example, the bullet that the princess shot at the end. He directly solved everything, or he just added fuel to the fire and then gave some help at the critical moment. As long as the end result was the same, the latter was obviously more cheap. Then, my mission is complete. Yamana smiled faintly. Her body shattered little by little in front of Pharaoh and Siegetu. I'm very happy. Even though I'm dead, I can still come back and see you again. Father. I'm sorry, I wanted to destroy Sun City as well. I could have done more, but I let you down. Yamana. Pharaoh rushed forward angrily and hugged Yamana, who was about to shatter, in his arms. It's enough. It's enough. It's enough. Shattered. Pharaoh couldn't hold anything in his arms anymore. Container, Yamana and the princess exhaled at the same time. They looked at Pharaoh, who seemed to have reached the end of his life in an instant. They were also this man, the daughter of Pharaoh, the princess, and Yamana. But at this moment, they realized that they couldn't even do something as simple as hugging this man. Container, Yamana sighed slowly. She waved her hand, and the source of the good and evil scale, and the will of scale, flew into her hand. Container, Yamalana put the origin of the will of Libra into the good and evil Libra. She lowered her head and looked at it. Suddenly, she said in a soft voice, "The good and evil Libra never belonged to this world. This is a strange thing that sun god Ra brought back from the void. It is used to judge humans and divide souls. Its power is powerful enough to divide the souls of this entire world." You are. The princess frowned. Yamana, or the goddess of justice? Container, Yamana didn't seem to hear the princess question. She just looked at Boss Luo deeply and suddenly asked, although the evil scale was brought back from the void by a sun god Ra, it is bound to my soul. Can I trade something that belongs to me? Of course. Boss Luo nodded with a smile. I'm already dead. It wasn't my intention to leave my soul in the evil scale. Container, Yamana nodded and then threw the good and evil scale to Luochio. Here you go. Good and evil scale entered his hand. This was the first time that Luochio touched this powerful godly item. When the good and evil scale stood on his palm, a message about the scale flashed in Boss Luo's mind. Good and evil scale, one of the 7 godly items of the Eternal Empire, part of the Eternal Wheel. It was a very simple message about the scale, but it was enough to make Boss Luo's expression change slightly. The scale was something that sun god Ra brought back from the void. It turned out that it was a relic of the Eternal Empire that had already been destroyed. Other than the Penglai treasure vault, the good and evil scale was the second thing that Luochio saw about the Eternal Empire. Chapter 1571. One of the 7 sacred artifacts of the Eternal Empire, a part of the Eternal Wheel. In his mind, the information of the scales of good and evil flashed by. Boss Luo, who was slightly moved, quickly calmed down. His heart was also calm. This was his nature and also the nature of the boss. It was the result of some kind of coercion. What do you want? Luocio looked at the container. Yamana, theoretically, this is the power that can change the world. It's worth a lot of things. Container. Yamana didn't say anything. She just looked at Boss Luo. It seemed to be some kind of communication. As a completely human, the princess obviously couldn't feel this strange communication, even if she had learned to read lips. She had to be able to read lips first, right? You can change to another way. After a while, Boss Luo suddenly said this. Container. Yamana frowned, but finally nodded as if she accepted the so-called change to another way result. What way? Boss Luo said calmly, send you to them. Container. Yamana was silent for a moment, then finally nodded, deal. Then, Boss Luo smiled. He waved his hand, and a goatskin scroll slowly opened in front of Container. Yamana. Container. Yamana took a deep breath. Before she was about to sign the contract, she suddenly smiled and said, compared to the previous one, I like the current one more. She's much easier to talk to. Probably because I don't know how to do business. Boss Luo shook his head. Container. Yamana took a deep look and slowly let go of her hand. But at this moment, the princess suddenly walked over and grabbed Container. Yamana's wrist. Wait. The princess frowned and said in a deep voice, make things clear. What are you two plotting? What do you want to do? The one just now wanted to destroy everything. Do you want to do the same? Container. Yamana shook her head. The princess gritted her teeth and glared at Luocio. And you? Who the hell are you? Why would he appear beside me and pretend to be my classmate? You brought me all the way to the desert, all the way here. Did you already know all of this? Her Royal Highness. No, it should be Claudia. Only one person would say that Boss Luo was her classmate and that he was the one who brought her to this desert. Only Claudia, who lived in the outside world, would say that. Actually, I'm not an imposter, Luocio said slowly. Claudia, it's nice to meet you again. Don't call me that. Your Highness. Claudia clutched her hair tightly. I don't even know who I am now. After I entered that door, there were two voices in my head, two completely different lives. Who am I? She hugged her own head. That kind of fear that she didn't even know who she was, almost made her lose her mind. Under the crisis of the will of Libra, the sense of crisis was able to keep her calm. But now it was impossible. Who am I? Claudia looked at Luocio, who brought her all the way here in pain. Am I not anyone? You? Who do you want to be? This wasn't Boss Luo's voice. This was the voice of Vessel Yamanana. She looked at Claudia and asked expressionlessly, is it Claudia or Yamanana? If you can only choose one of these two identities, which one do you want to choose? I don't know. Claudia shook her head blankly. She subconsciously looked at Pharaoh, who was silent because of the destruction of the third Yamanana, and then looked at Siegetu, who was standing there silently with his eyes closed. She opened her mouth a few times but no words came out. I don't know, me and the other you who isn't a vessel. Who is the princess and who is the ordinary girl? Vessel Yamanana said at this time, I will leave. After I leave, only one of Yamanana and Claudia will be left. This is the final decision between you and her. Let the unfinished battle in front of the door continue. As she spoke, Vessel Yamanana's body suddenly opened up a bright light and turned into a pure white light ball, directly enveloping Claudia. The light ball stopped moving. But time still passed. At this time, Siegetu slowly exhaled and opened his eyes. He raised his head and looked at everything. Finally, he looked at the collapsed temple. Don't you plan to wait for her to come out? Boss Luo suddenly asked at this time, Mr. Siegetu. How much time do I have? Siegetu asked calmly. Soon. Boss Luo said in a low voice, You and His Majesty have the same request, so your time is the same. Then I won't wait. Siegetu shook his head. Since it's the last time, I want to do something I want to do. The last thing I have to do. Boss Luo nodded, but asked curiously, "If it's you, who would you want to come out? Claudia or Yamanana?" The answer. Siegetu turned back and said calmly, "I have already given it to her. As for whether I can come out or not, it doesn't matter anymore. I am just a sinner." As he spoke, Siegetu didn't turn back and walked straight into the broken temple. Boss Luo looked at his back and thought, "The door on the left." He said in a low voice, then smiled slightly, "Do you prefer the life outside?" Boss Luo didn't like to guess things because he was afraid that he would guess what he wanted to guess, but he actually knew what he should know. Siegetu disappeared in the broken temple. At the same time, the light ball shattered, containers, Yamanana and Claudia, both fell to the ground. Ivan swallowed his saliva and looked around. Then he looked at Boss Luo carefully and said, "They?" Boss Luo smiled and waved his hand. A coffin appeared out of thin air. Bang! The coffin fell in front of Ivan, and he was so scared that he fell to the ground. Of course, he recognized this coffin. This was the coffin that contained the body of the goddess of justice. A long time ago, there was a goddess in the sky who fell in love with a mortal on the ground. Boss Luo's voice sounded slowly, like a poet who walked in the desert and told stories to the merchants in the desert in front of the bonfire at night. The goddess's sister was jealous of her and finally separated her from the mortal. Jealousy even made the goddess's sister take crazy revenge. She killed the mortal and used the mortal's bones to make nails. She used the nails to nail the goddess's body in the coffin forever. Ivan opened his mouth. Wasn't this the version that Libra's will said? How could a mortal fight against the power of a goddess? Boss Luo said in a low voice, "Even if they were unwilling, even if they were angry. Mortals were always mortals. In that era they were played by the goddess." As he said, Boss Luo slowly put the sapphire in his hand into the coffin and placed it on the hands of the goddess's body. The originally flickering sapphire seemed to have stabilized. It gradually lost its light and became quiet. Boss Luo looked at Ivan and smiled. "This coffin has a special power that can preserve the soul. Even the good and evil sides of the scales of good and evil can be preserved. But once it leaves, it will disappear very quickly." Ivan smiled awkwardly. "I still need to eat." "So, the sapphire contains the mortal's soul that moved the goddess?" "It's just one side." Boss Luo shook his head. "That mortal has probably reincarnated." "I see." Ivan nodded. Although he did not quite understand, he nodded. A mortal fell in love with a goddess. This young man is really a pitiful guy. But, even so, this brother is really amazing. He actually fell in love with the goddess. If there's a chance, I also want to meet this brother. He was just casually saying this. Most people would say this casually. Boss Luo smiled and said, "Actually, you have already met." Ivan opened his mouth and asked subconsciously, Met what?" Boss Luo ignored him and closed the coffin slowly. A long time ago, the goddess who represented justice fell in love with the man on the ground. The mortal's name was Siegetu. The ground started to crack. The coffin fell from the crack and finally sank into the ground. After that, the crack closed. Everything returned to normal. Ivan opened his eyes wide and looked at Boss Luo in disbelief. "Wait, what did you say? That mortal was? If that was the case, why didn't the princess who said she wanted to duel look at the high priest? No. Could it be that the resurrected goddess is not the goddess of justice, but... Do you know what a secret is?" Boss Luo made a gesture of silence at this moment, and then stepped back step by step. At the same time, his figure faded away in front of Eben, leaving only his voice. "This is a secret." Finally, it faded away. At this moment, Claudia on the ground suddenly opened her eyes and woke up. Eben opened his mouth. He couldn't figure out who was who. "You woke up. Who are you?" Ivan asked nervously. Claudia's eyes were blank. She rubbed her forehead and saw Ivan in front of her. She raised her eyebrows. "Huh? You greedy guy, why are you here? Weren't you knocked out and stuffed into the water tank? Her eyes were filled with hatred and disdain. Ivan stopped talking and patted his head hard. He felt that everything in front of him was so unreal. Only the heavy gold in his hand was real. At this moment, a ray of light suddenly shot out from the body of Yaman Lana. It shot into the sky, as if it penetrated the sky of the Sun City, and entered the void. It disappeared. Not far away, the pharaoh of the kingdom slowly closed his eyes. His life had come to an end. Live well. These were his last words. Claudia couldn't help but feel sad in her heart. Your Highness! At this moment, a clear voice sounded. The flying curtain came along the edge of the huge pit, and on the curtain was the little maid Yalian. Genie sat at the head of the curtain, holding something with disdain. He was holding Mr. Otto's body. He seemed to have fainted. At the same time, someone walked out slowly from the ruins at the edge of the huge pit, naked, confused, and unsteady. They were the humans who were buried at the bottom of the temple and had their good and evil sides separated. The scales of good and evil had been lost, and they were able to wake up. Claudia looked up and surveyed the surroundings of the crater. She had an indescribable feeling. Hey, did a lot of things happen here? I can tell you for 3 months. Ivan snorted and said, Just pay me. Let me see if there are any bullets left. Claudia sneered and picked up the divine weapon, pistol. Ivan shrunk his neck in horror and threw out a piece of gold to save his life. These two people seemed to be like a cat and a mouse. No matter in the outside world or in the Sun City, they couldn't stop. At the same time, a flashing door appeared from the bottom to the top. Claudia glanced at it, and a weird expression appeared on her face. It was because the words, exit, were written on the door of light. The data of experimental subject number 132 has been recorded. The data of experimental subject number 113 has been recorded. In the darkness, light and shadow flashed. It was the text that kept appearing on a broken screen on the ground. In this experiment, I have collected enough data. I believe that I have fully understood all the thinking patterns of human beings. Someone walked into the darkness and walked up to the broken screen. He picked it up and gently wiped the dust off the screen, entering the last step of the plan. I am about to hatch, and I will become a complete life. He looked at the text on the screen silently. No. You are not a complete life, you are only a complete soul. But he had lost all means of communication with it. He could only look at the text on the screen. Scales, scales. Scales can only divide souls, but they can't create souls. Incubation in progress. Incubation in progress. After the incubation, I will meet the expectations of the Creator. Please name me, Creator. Please name me, please name me. Naming seemed to be the last step of its incubation. The text stopped there. Amino. He whispered a name, but there was no input tool here. Remember Amino. My sister's name. Please name, please name. The text still kept repeating, and the flickering light on the screen kept changing on his face. But he had closed his eyes. He closed them permanently. Brother, why is there sadness in the world? When brother grows up, brother will create a world without sadness for you, okay? I like brother the most. Hashtag 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 PS. 1/60th. I don't know how much it is. Let's set it at 60 first. I won't remove the excess, but I'll make up for the deficiency. Still, I still have to pay it back. I always have to pay it back. The readers look at the prices every day, and they speak well. I really like this place. Chapter 1572. How many times do I have to tell you? I'm not your princess. My name is Claudia. In the ruins, the matter did not come to an end. Many problems came one after another. For example, they insisted that Claudia was the little maid of the princess. For example, those people who woke up from their deep sleep. They were travelers lost in the desert for more than 600 years. They, little by little, expanded everything in Sun City. There were at least 100,000 to 200,000 people. These people came from different places and even from different eras. Now that they woke up with the end of the power of the scales of good and evil, how to face the outside world was a difficult problem to solve. If these people are released, it will only attract the attention of the outside world government. Mr. Otto frowned in front of the door with the word exit. This is a worldwide incident, and it's related to the field of inhuman. There is only one way to make this trouble disappear. You mean, let them stay in this place? Claudia immediately understood what Mr. Otto meant. Isn't this too cruel for them? Aotua didn't agree. Letting them go is their cruelty. Not only did they have to consider how the people of the outside world would accept them, but they also had to consider how these hundreds of thousands of people could integrate into modern society, live, work, survive. Most of them probably didn't have any relatives in the outside world. Mr. Otto suddenly looked at Claudia with a blank expression. Why do you care so much about these people? Logically speaking, these people have nothing to do with you. They are the princess's people, not yours. Claudia said indifferently, they will be affected a little. A suggestion. Mr. Otto suddenly said at this time, use those people who treat you as a princess. Use the conditions that are beneficial to you. That's all I can say. What you want to do is up to you. Claudia was stunned, then fell silent. In the silence, her eyes naturally fell on the nervous little maid Elaine. Use the conditions that are useful to you. The people around you. Elaine had Jeannie by her side. Claudia's eyes suddenly lit up. The little handmaiden didn't know what this gaze meant, but the genie beside her had a bad feeling at this time. It felt like a predator was staring at him. Jeannie shuddered. He had a bad feeling about this. He hurriedly stood in front of Claudia and glared at her. Wait, he screamed. Wait, he screamed. Woman, don't force me to attack you. Claudia did not mind at all. Otto had said that the genie of Jeannie seemed to be very powerful, but in fact, it was limited by many things. It could not hurt humans unless the summoner wanted to. But obviously, the little handmaiden would not let the genie of Jeannie do that. Yalian, is it? Claudia took a deep breath. May I have a word with you? Your Highness? The little maid was startled. Then, she quickly walked towards Claudia. Your Highness, I'll be right there. Some things seemed to have to be done by herself. Before she could truly enjoy this freedom, she had to fulfill the obligations that once belonged to her other self. Claudia pulled the little maid to the side and said something. At this time, the people who woke up at the edge of the big pit were scattered around the ruins in twos and threes. With confusion, fear, and uneasiness, they touched and looked at the ruined world that they saw after opening their eyes. They didn't riot at first. It seems that after the death of the dividing plane, as their original bodies, they can more or less remember, or even remember all of it. Mr. Otto looked around and thought to himself, that was a great idea. The genie of Jeannie was furious. He came to Mr. Otto with a 10-meter-long broadsword. What do you think I am? A tool. Mr. Otto sneered, as if he would not stop until the genie of Jeannie was dead. And a tool without dignity. I'll kill you! The genie of Jeannie screamed. Don't you want to know the whereabouts of that person? Mr. Otto was not afraid at all. The genie of Jeannie suddenly deflated. The genie of Jeannie grabbed Mr. Otto's collar and stared at him. That person, where the hell is he? Let go. Mr. Otto said indifferently. The genie of Jeannie gritted his teeth and reluctantly put Mr. Otto down. Can you tell me now? Mr. Otto narrowed his eyes and said, squat down. The genie of Jeannie's body suddenly burst into flames. The appearance of the handsome boy suddenly changed back to that of an evil ghost. Otto, bastard. You better know when to stop. I don't owe you anything. I have the information about that person. Mr. Otto gently knocked on his head and said indifferently, If you have the ability, you can blow up this place and get the information from here. If you can break the restriction of the magic lamp, you are welcome to do so. Why wouldn't it want to do that? The genie of genie was about to explode. This guy used to be a kind-hearted boy. Otherwise, the magic lamp wouldn't have recognized his qualification to summon the genie of genie. How did he become so ugly after thousands of years? If I knew this, I wouldn't have tempted this guy to make those 3 wishes. The genie of genie regretted greatly. It knew that Otto's current character was mainly caused by itself. Now that it was time to eat its own medicine, the genie of genie's depression could not be expressed in words. Are you going to tell me if I squat down? The genie of genie took a deep breath and stared into Otto's eyes, saying word by word, "Okay. I'll squat. I'll squat now." The genie of genie closed its eyes and squatted directly on the ground. After this, it swore that it would never mention dignity in front of any mortals. "Tell me I've squatted. Where is the person?" The genie of genie hurriedly urged. But after a while, the genie of genie didn't hear anything. The genie of genie quickly opened its eyes. Mr. Otto had already walked to the light door of the exit and was about to step out of it. "Otto! You bastard! 1,000-year-old bastard!" The red genie was like an abandoned woman. She let out a mournful cry. "Michael Clubb, the hermit, that's all I know." That was the last thing Mr. Otto said to Genie before he disappeared into the light door. Genie tried to grab Otto, but he couldn't. There was a limit to how far he could go from the magic lamp, and the lamp was in Elaine's hand. As for the little maid, she was dragged far away by Claudia, and no one knew what she was talking about. Michael Clubb? Hermit? The red genie was stunned, repeating the message left by Mr. Aotua. He frowned. Suddenly, he shouted angrily, "Who can tell me what the hell is Michael Clubb?" Just as Genie was vexed that he didn't ask Otto for more details, Maid Elaine and Claudia came back together. Maid Elaine's expression was quite complicated at this time. Her eyes were full of uneasiness, but she also seemed to be constantly encouraging herself, making people feel pity for her. "Genie! Genie!" Finally, she walked to the front of Genie, raised her head, and mustered up her courage. I want to make a wish." She suddenly stopped. Genie reached out his hand and covered the little maid's mouth. Genie had just gotten the news about that man. How could he allow his little maid to exhaust all her wishes now? It didn't want to wait 100 years or even 1,000 years for the next opportunity to appear. "Don't say anything," Genie said quickly. "Your first wish hasn't been fulfilled yet." "Of course, I know what you want to say." "I'll do it. I'll do it, okay? Count it in the first wish. Anyway, this is the only thing left for your princess. I'll do it, okay?" Claudia didn't expect things to go so smoothly. She blinked her eyes and looked at this powerful ancient elf with a strange expression. "Okay, the title of the most powerful tool belongs to you." A figure slowly floated up from the ruins of the temple at the bottom of the crater. She was bathed in golden light like the sun. The holy light on Elaine's body shone on everyone who woke up, making them feel a gentle warmth. "I'm the new saintess." The little maid's voice trembled slightly. "From today on, you are all my people. Rebuild this sun city with me." She probably still needed to say something. Claudia, oh no, Her Royal Highness just told her a lot of words, but she couldn't remember most of them. Only these few words were said with all her might. "This child, is there any problem?" Claudia looked up at the holy light in the sky. Strictly speaking, the special effect of Genie was quite good. Shaking her head, Claudia took a deep breath and then walked into the collapsed temple. She had never forgotten the reason she had entered the desert and experienced so many encounters. Her original goal was to find the figure of the man who was hugging a screen. He was sitting on the ground, motionless, with his head lowered, in the depths of this dilapidated temple. "Father, I finally found you." Claudia came to the man's side and slowly sat down. She said with a complicated expression, Should I call you father or high priest? Light door. Claudia was alone when she walked out of the door. Outside was the Oasis Temple. When she saw the date palm trees around the Oasis Temple again, Claudia slowly took a deep breath. I thought you would bring Siegetu's body out. It was Mr. Otto's voice. Claudia looked over and saw Mr. Otto leaning against a rock. There was a pile of sand under his feet. This is? Claudia frowned while looking at the sand. Iben. Mr. Otto said indifferently, or Aria. When I came out, his body was turning into sand and he couldn't say anything. This guy was still thinking about Dollar before he died. What happened to you guys outside? Claudia shook her head. What happened before she entered the oasis? A lot of things happened, but she didn't want to talk about it now. I buried my father inside. Since Sun City is where he worked hard all his life, let him rest in peace there. Otto nodded, then looked at Claudia and asked curiously, What method did you use to make that little handmaiden agree to take over this mess? Claudia said indifferently, Nothing, it was just an order. She thinks I'm still the princess. Otto said, I browsed through the internal server of the temple. This little handmaiden was abandoned on the streets in Sun City and almost died of illness. It was Her Royal Highness who took her to the palace and took care of her day and night. Of course, this is just a template set by the high priest when he created the material. Claudia said indifferently, I promised her that I would come back here to see her every once in a while. Mr. Otto said indifferently, This has nothing to do with me. Claudia said unhappily, Then why are you still here? Haven't you always wanted to leave Sun City? Now that you're out, why are you still here? Unexpectedly, Mr. Otto shrugged and spread his hands. My equipment was destroyed inside. Do you have a phone on you? Claudia suddenly opened her mouth and then laughed out loud. She laughed out loud. She sat on the ground and looked at the clear sky of the hot desert. There were tears in Claudia's eyes. At this time, a figure came out of the light door with difficulty. It was Eben. He was carrying a heavy bag on his back. Mr. Otto looked at this guy in surprise, and Claudia also looked at him curiously. Eben looked around nervously and suddenly said, Well, I think I'm rich. Cairo Airport. Passengers going to Britain, please start passing the security check, the announcement sounded. Claudia had already passed the security check and was now waiting at the boarding gate. Claudia couldn't find her documents at all, but Otto only took half a day to get them for her. Is there anyone here? A strange but familiar voice sounded in Claudia's ears. She looked up and saw a young man with an oriental face. He only had a ticket in his hand and didn't carry any luggage. You are. Claudia opened her mouth and looked at him seriously. After a while, she said, You seem to be my classmate. The young man smiled. Classmate? Claudia didn't care much. Just a student who just transferred from the school. I'm not familiar with him. The young man nodded, sat down casually, and then opened a book. Claudia had seen this book in the bookstore when she came in. It was a book about the ancient Egyptian civilization. The two sat quietly like this. Claudia didn't pay too much attention to this young man who gave her a familiar feeling. But she didn't pay too much attention to him because too many things had happened this time. Her mind was basically filled with this experience. After half a year of investigation, she finally found a clue after her father's sudden disappearance. Then she resolutely asked for leave and flew to the desert of Egypt. Then she took the risk alone. First, she met the bandits in the desert, then she got the legendary magic lamp in the underground pyramid, met Mr. Otto and Aria, and finally entered the temple of the oasis. Everything that happened in the oasis, everything. All these seemed to be able to be written into a thick storybook and passed down. But perhaps not many people would believe it. Perhaps, when she was old, she could only tell her grandson or granddaughter. Then, they would gather around her and mumble for her to say more. Claudia smiled knowingly. It was time to board the plane. Claudia stood up hurriedly and picked up her suitcase. But at this time, a handkerchief fell out of her pocket. You dropped something. The young man suddenly reminded her at this time. Claudia looked down and subconsciously said, "Isn't this yours?" "Oh, this is mine." She bent down to pick up the handkerchief, then frowned and stuffed it into her clothes, walking quickly towards the registration entrance. "Who are you?" the young man suddenly asked softly behind her. "Yes." Claudia subconsciously turned back, but she couldn't see the young man on the seat. She shook her head, then smiled slightly, turning around and walking into the boarding passage. There seemed to be a light in front of her, the light of freedom. Subworld. The subworld where Mississippi servant girl went on a business trip. Mississippi servant girl who was tapping the buttons stopped. One of her hands was holding something at this time, gently putting it on her lip. Mississippi servant girl slightly opened her lips and bit it. "How's the taste?" Boss Luo smiled at this time. "Date palm, a handwritten letter brought back from the desert. Tastes good." "Master went to the desert?" Mississippi servant girl's eyes flashed, then she smiled. "It seems that student Claudia's problem has been solved." Boss Luo nodded casually without saying much. Instead, he turned over his palm, and a box appeared in his palm, a hard disc. "This is?" Mississippi servant girl asked curiously. Boss Luo said softly, "A mortal used 600 years to create this artificial soul. Can you let her have a body?" Mississippi servant girl's eyes brightened. "I'll try." "Okay." Boss Luo nodded. "After she has a body, let's call her Amino. Then, let her be born in the elf forest in the main god's world. There is no sadness." Chapter 1573. In the dimensional crevice in an unknown place. On a floating desolate land, a figure was lying on a rock. He was using his hands as a pillow, with an open history of the Roman Empire on his face. He was sleeping soundly. At this moment, a centipede-like void original demon was quietly crawling over. Suddenly, this centipede-like void original demon straightened its body, and was actually 50 to 60 meters tall. In front of this void original demon, the person sleeping soundly on the rock was as small as an ant. Just as this void original demon opened its sharp mouth and was about to bite the person on the rock into pieces, a golden light suddenly shot down from above. At the same time, the man who was sleeping with his face covered by the history book also stretched out his hand. His fingers formed a sword seal and gently moved it. That golden light that shot down seemed to come alive, and spun rapidly, cutting this void original demon into dozens of pieces in an instant. The severed corpses of the original demon fell one after another. Only then did the man stretch and sit up. The book on his face naturally fell into his hands, and he closed it. That golden light also returned to the man's side, and turned into the appearance of an ordinary door lock. It hasn't been a week yet? Taisetsu. In the dimensional crevice, time didn't count. Even if Taisetsu was silently counting in his heart, he didn't know if a week had passed in the outside world, at least in the world number 003 where he was in, or only a few minutes had passed in that world. Taisetsu. Suddenly, a voice that almost moved Taisetsu to tears quietly sounded behind him. Taisetsu quickly stood up, turned around, and shouted in high spirits, "Boss! Why are you here?" The one who appeared in front of Taisetsu was surprisingly Luochio, Boss Luo. Boss Luo was carrying a plastic bag in his hand, and the things inside seemed to be dates? "I'm here to take you back." Luochio smiled and said, "I think your work should be done, boss." Taisetsu thought for a moment and said, "There's something I want to report to you before we go back." What Taisetsu said was a report. He rarely used such a formal tone, so Luochio couldn't help but stop. He didn't know what Taisetsu would surprise him. "Let's talk while we eat." Boss Luo nodded and waved his hand. Simple tables and chairs appeared out of thin air on the desolate land. Boss Luo tapped the table lightly with his finger, and a ripple-like rhythm spread out from the center. All the primordial void demons lurking in the desolate land, regardless of size or level, were instantly shattered. Taisetsu's expression changed slightly. He didn't know why, but he suddenly had a feeling that in this dimension, the boss seemed to be more powerful than when he was in the small world, or perhaps, he could do whatever he wanted. But the boss himself didn't seem to have any self-awareness. "Tell me, what's the matter?" Boss Luo brought out a date. "Oh, it's like this." Taisetsu took it with both hands and pulled out a chair to sit down. "Previously, I accidentally snuck into the Transcendence organization. There was no concept of time here, but in terms of pure feeling, Taisetsu didn't say a long time. Boss Luo didn't say anything after listening to Taisetsu's narration. He just sat there quietly and ate the fruit. Ninth beginning. Fushi Throne. Boss Luo suddenly muttered softly, "Holy Land Soul Palace." "Boss." Taisetsu hesitated for a moment. Actually, he had been thinking about Black Soul Fushi ever since he left the Lost Garden in the Void, and the questions in his heart gradually increased. "I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask." "Go ahead." Boss Luo nodded. Taisetsu asked seriously, "Boss, how powerful are we?" Luochio couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why do you ask?" Daz thought for a while and said, "The main thing is to consider our current situation clearly. According to the words of the ninth beginning, Black Soul Fushi, our title. Oh, our shop has a predecessor. The predecessor is the Holy Land. There is the Soul Hall in the Holy Land. It is the place where all the Black Soul envoys are controlled. In other words, our shop existed in the later period, and Black Souls like the ninth beginning were all old officials of the previous dynasty." Boss Luo blinked. "Just say what you want to say." Taisetsu took a deep breath and said, "Black Soul Fushi is very scary. To be honest, in front of him, I can't even resist. Boss, I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. When I saw him, I was thinking about how to self-destruct to return to the Ark of the Covenant so that you could revive me. You see, this is escaping. To be honest, even Miss Yu Yi can't give me this feeling." Boss Luo nodded. "You're afraid that the Ark of the Covenant isn't Soul Palace, and the current shop can't control these Black Soul envoys of the previous origin level?" Taisetsu nodded. "That's right. He's really unexpectedly powerful, and he's only the ninth beginning. In other words, there are 8 more before him. However, I don't know how many more there are after him. But in our shop, there are only a few people who come and go. If something really happens in the future," Boss Luo said, "so, you want to know if we're powerful or not, right?" Taisetsu nodded and said helplessly, "After all, I really treat this shop as my home. I don't like what's wrong with this home." "Home?" Luochio opened his mouth and looked at the gray scarf around Taisetsu's neck. He smiled. "Okay, I'll let you know if we're powerful or not." Taisetsu froze. Boss Luo waved his hand at this time, and a chair appeared out of thin air beside the table. The next second there was one more person on the chair. Ninth of the beginning, Onyx Soul Fushi. Daz suddenly took a deep breath. At this time, the ninth beginning Onyx Soul Fushi opened his mouth slightly, raised his arm, and even held a small teacup in his palm. It seemed that he was planning to drink tea, but he only drank half of it. Oh, that's right. The ninth beginning was wearing a pair of large underpants. "What's the situation?" The ninth beginning, Fushi's hand that was holding the teacup was still frozen. He looked in front of him in surprise, and then a strange color flashed in his eyes. He put down the teacup gracefully and stood up. The moment he stood up, the big underpants disappeared. The ninth beginning, Fushi, still changed into a green robe. He bowed slightly to Boss Luo and said, "Ninth beginning, Fushi, greets the new master of the Holy Land. No need to be so polite." Boss Luo smiled and motioned for this ancient Black Soul envoy to sit down. He said calmly, "I just heard Taisetsu talk about you. In fact, it's nothing serious. It's just that Taisetsu is worried that the Black Soul at the beginning level might bully me, the young shop owner. I don't want to upset him, so I invited you here. Black Soul Fushi opened his mouth but couldn't say anything for a while. He shook his head with a bitter smile. It seems that this is my fault. I probably said something that made him misunderstand. Since it's a misunderstanding, then let's clear up this misunderstanding. Boss Luo waved his hand. On the desolate ground, a black cabinet slowly floated out. That kind of restrictive power made Daz frown subconsciously. Ninth Beginning's Black Soul Fushi flashed a strange look in his eyes. But he just lowered his head and didn't say anything. Boss Luo said, "This is the Ark of the Covenant. When I inherited the shop, I used it to put the Black Soul Envoy's life lamp. I don't know about the Soul Hall, but your life lamp isn't in the Ark of the Covenant. But since you're also a Black Soul Envoy, then put your life lamp in the Ark of the Covenant. This is the shop's rule. There are some rules that I don't want to change for the time being." Black Soul Fushi didn't say anything. He just calmly opened his hands. A trace of soul light slowly floated out of his body. Then, the door of the Ark of the Covenant opened. This trace of soul light directly entered the Ark of the Covenant. Until the Ark of the Covenant's door closed and disappeared into the ground, Black Soul Fushi's face didn't show any unhappiness. Everything seemed so natural. Boss Luo then said, "Since your vacation is still here but you accidentally woke up, what do you plan to do now? End your vacation early or do you want to continue your vacation?" Black Soul Fushi thought for a while and said, "Please allow me to continue this hard-earned vacation." "Okay." Boss Luo nodded and said, "Since that's the case, then temporarily seal all the memories of the Black Soul that you accidentally woke up from. Go back, Fushi Throne." After that, Boss Luo casually knocked on the table. The Ninth Beginning Black Soul Fushi instantly disappeared from this desolate land. "I'm not dreaming, right?" Taisetsu subconsciously rubbed his eyes. He knew that the shop definitely wasn't that simple. But the way he waved the Ninth Beginning Black Soul Fushi around was too okay. Boss Luo smiled. "Now you don't have to worry about anything. This family will be fine. Let's go back and pack up. I haven't been to school for a few days." Boss Luo opened the passage to Subworld 003 and directly walked in. Taisetsu suddenly shivered and muttered to himself, I didn't expect that the boss, who usually doesn't say anything, could be so scary. Scared me to death." He didn't expect that the problem that he had been worrying about for such a long time, in the boss' eyes, was just a matter of a few words. When he first met the Ninth Beginning Black Soul Fushi, he felt that the boss behind the scenes aura was too strong. But he didn't expect that this guy would take out his life lamp so easily. But thinking about it, the boss didn't seem to be very interested in the shop's predecessor. Why didn't he ask about the Black Soul Fushi at all when it came to the Holy Land? Probably, there's some reason. Taisetsu vaguely felt that this matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. But he quickly stopped thinking about these things. It was too tiring to think about these things. It was more suitable for him to be a fighter happily. Paradise lost in the void. Between the thrones. In the octagonal pavilion in the Fire Cloud Cave. The Fushi Throne suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the teacup in his hand with a face full of suspicion. The teacup had clearly lit up. Beside him, the sword girl Hidden Sword looked at him with a frown, her face full of suspicion and vigilance. Just now. What happened? The Fushi Throne pondered and asked. Hidden Sword thought for a while, looked at him and said seriously, Just now, you suddenly disappeared and then came back. You also changed your clothes. The Fushi Throne subconsciously looked down. Yep, he really did change his clothes. He didn't say anything, just silently took out an 8 trigrams compass and began to spin it. After a while, the spinning compass suddenly broke into many small pieces of wood. The Fushi Throne looked at this scene with a strange expression and didn't say anything. So, what happened? Hidden Sword frowned and asked again. I don't know what happened, but I'm sure of one thing. Fushi Throne took a deep breath and said with a smile, I'm a bit hot. Little Jian, do you want to fan me? You're crazy. Hidden Sword coldly snorted. He stood up and walked into the room. The Fushi throne looked at the disappearing Hidden Sword and suddenly wiped his forehead with his hand. He bitterly smiled and said, "It really is hot? Otherwise, where did this cold sweat come from? What the hell is going on?" He frowned as he looked at the shattered parts of the 8 trigrams compass on the table. He couldn't help but sink into contemplation. In the Lost Garden of the Void, although the king-level experts didn't meet often, the difference between the king-level experts wasn't too big. Who could make him disappear inexplicably and then return? Just as he was thinking, the octagonal pavilion suddenly cracked open and a white bone arm stretched out from the crack. This white bone arm was holding a bamboo scroll. The Fushi throne reached out and took the bamboo scroll. The white bone arm withdrew into the crack, and then the crack disappeared. The Fushi throne slowly opened the bamboo scroll. This bamboo scroll recorded the information sent back by the members of the Transcending Organization who were in charge of gathering information. Every once in a while, the members who were gathering information outside would send back some noteworthy information to the sovereign who was on duty. There were mainly 2 pieces of information written on the bamboo scroll. The first one: Heaven gave an order to completely end all exploration activities in the subworlds and recall all the angels who went out to explore the subworld. The second one: Ra, the Sun God, and the 9 Pillar Gods, who were accidentally trapped in Subworld 002 because of the appearance of reinforcements, finally broke out of the imprisonment of Subworld 002 and successfully escaped. The reinforcements that suddenly appeared were suspected to be the goddess of justice and truth. Matt ######PS 2 of 60. Chapter 1574. The depth of the dimension crack was unknown. Not to mention that they didn't have the concept of time, they probably didn't even have the concept of the specific location in the dimension crack. On a desolate floating land, several light figures landed, looking slightly embarrassed. "Stop," one of the light figures suddenly said. "We will remember this embarrassment." Although that was what they said, the other figures of light seemed to be rather weak. The light figure that spoke first said again, "This time, thanks to Matt's appearance, we were able to break the cage of Subworld 002 and escape. But next time, would Mate appear again? We won't always be so lucky here. The failure of this exploration should be a warning to us." Obviously, they were the 9 pillar gods of ancient Egypt that had fallen in subworld number 002 mentioned in the information obtained by the Fushi throne. At this time, in addition to the 9 pillar gods, there was another figure in the light figure. It was the girl that the Libra's will transformed into. The goddess of justice and truth, Matt. "Father God, I'm late." Matt walked in front of the gods and came to the largest light figure, and he bowed his head deeply. The only one who could make the goddess of justice and truth of ancient Egypt bow her head and call him Father God was the sun god Ra of the 9 pillar gods. The ancient Egyptian civilization had several generations of sun gods, and Horus was one of them. Ra was the original sun. "Thank you, Mate." The sun god Ra walked out of the light and shadow. He looked like an ordinary middle-aged man. "Fortunately, I left you behind before I left. Otherwise, I'm afraid we would have been trapped in subworld number 002 until we perished. It's too scary, subworld 002. Another 9 pillar god in the light figure couldn't help but sigh and say, "We have explored so many subworlds, and this is the first time we have seen such a place without legends. Without legends, our power is like that of mortals. This subworld 002 is a forbidden area that forbids all God's power. Once we fall, we are in danger of dying at any time." "That's right," another one of the 9 pillar gods said with lingering fear. "Legend has it that the further ahead a subworld is, the more dangerous it is. Subworld 002 is already so dangerous, then how terrifying would Subworld 001 be? Not to mention the primordial worlds before them. Remember, no one said that the world after subworld number 001 is the original world. Ra, the sun god, said in a deep voice, the original world may not be named after a number. Remember, we still have many unknowns about the dimensional crevices and the subworlds. Is there really a need to explore the original world? This was the voice of another pillar god. Its voice caused all the pillar gods to fall silent. Was it really necessary to explore the primordial? Come to think of it, no one had ever forced them to explore the primordial. They had merely heard a voice that would appear in the hearts of every powerful creature that entered the dimensional crevice. Let's go take a look at the primordial. Let's go take a look at the primordial. Why should we go take a look at the primordial? This was something that no one knew, and no one could say for sure. In the dimensional crevice there were countless groups of various sizes, but there were only three most famous ones: the Transcendence, the Secret Society, and the Gate of Truth. But until now, no one had heard of these three mysterious groups successfully conquering the original world. The Pillar Gods suddenly began to discuss incessantly. As the leader of the Pillar Gods, Ra, the Sun God, shook its head inwardly. It called its daughter Matt to its side and asked with a frown, "How did you know that we were trapped in Subworld 002, and how did you break the cage outside to enter Subworld 002? I didn't discover it." The goddess of justice and truth, Matt, shook his head and smiled bitterly. "In truth, I was sent directly to your side, and the price was the scales of good and evil that you once brought back from the void." Scales. Ra, the sun god, was silent for a moment before saying, "You met that person?" She knew who the father was referring to, but she shook her head. It wasn't that person, it was another person. It seemed to be that person's successor. "Father, after you left, thousands of years had passed in our original world. I'm sorry, the scales, as the divine weapon that you brought back, was not able to be kept in my hands in the end." Ra, the sun god, shook its head and said, "At that time, we exchanged the entire divine system to obtain the road signs. But the dangers of the process are unknown to outsiders. The large and small groups in the void only know that the 9 Pillar Gods' exploration is efficient, but they don't know how much we have to pay. Only we know that the road ahead is still very dangerous." "Matt, do you hate me? The reason why I left you and Scales behind was to deal with this kind of unexpected situation." "Father." Matt shook her head, "Your daughter has come as promised." Ra, the sun god, smiled with relief. "You have come, but we really have no way out. We have been trapped in the subworld 002 for so long, but we have been unable to break its secret. The road ahead is stuck here. If we can't break through the subworld 002, I'm afraid this is our end." Matt frowned, lowered her head and muttered, "Father, the current successor's attitude seems to be different from the previous one. When I met him this time, I found that he is a very easy person to get along with. Maybe we can?" Ra shook his head. "Whether it is the original one or the current successor, some rules can never be changed. Before we have enough to move the other party, we can't get anything. Matt, we have sold the entire divine system, and even the scales that were given to you have been sacrificed. Now we are very poor." It was the kind of poverty that one could hear jingling sounds. Matt couldn't help but be silent. She found that whether it was her or the other pillar gods who had stopped the discussion, they were all silent at this time. The current pillar gods. I'm afraid that they can only sell themselves? There is another way. Ra, the sun god, looked at the goddess Matt and the other 9 pillar gods with a serious expression, the land of fallen. Matt didn't know what this was, but the other 9 pillar gods heard this and their expressions changed slightly. They obviously knew. "Father, the land of fallen. What is this place?" A sun god, Ra said with a serious face. "Listen, The scale that I gave you was obtained from the land of fallen void, by chance. It is a void divine artifact that even I can't completely see through. We need more void divine artifacts to continue our journey. We can find more void artifacts in the land of fallen? Matt looked at the other pillar god's serious expressions. It is very dangerous, isn't it, Father? There are countless powerful gods in the void, or creatures that can stand shoulder to shoulder with gods. Believe me, Matt, this number will overturn your concept of gods. The vastness of this large world is not something you can imagine. Ra, the sun god, said self-deprecatingly, you see, I'm the sun god, but in the void, I've met at least 50 people who call themselves the sun god. They're from different god systems, and they're not even from god systems. With so many powerful beings, it is natural that we are not the only ones who found the land of fallen. As a matter of fact, the Voidfall was a well-known place in the Void because it seemed to be one of the main battlefields of the Void's old era. One could not find Void divine artifacts like the Libra there, and one could even find some information about the old era. Countless powerful beings came one after another, but they all fell in the land of fallen. Back then, when I obtained the scales, I also almost lost my life. If that's the case. Matt couldn't help but hesitate. R.A. said heavily, we obtained the road sign and explored here. The process was very dangerous, and we have already used up all the pillar gods. If we don't steal, we can only sell ourselves. But why did we explore the origin in the first place? For eternity, for the ultimate freedom. The moment we sell ourselves, it is equivalent to completely cutting off eternity and freedom. Even if we reach the origin in the end, we are still losers. But in the void, we can launch plunder at will. I am afraid that we will face different powerful groups, big and small. If it is not a last resort, I will not let the pillar gods bear this kind of infamy. Besides, we still have to enter the subworld 002 again. The subworld 002 is unprecedentedly dangerous. Perhaps we can get a void artifact that can help us get through this difficulty in the land of fallen, so we must go to the land of fallen. Matt nodded, looked at her father god, and looked at the pillar gods beside him. She heard it. The sound of a bell. Since they had decided to go to the fallen land, the pillar gods immediately set off after a break. On the way, the sun god Ra suddenly asked his daughter, "My daughter, tell me what happened before and after your transaction. I want to know what kind of person this successor is." Father god? Matt couldn't help but frown. She seemed to feel that her father god had other thoughts in mind. Then the sun god Ra was silent at this time, but he was communicating with the goddess Matt in another way, telepathically. In this long process of exploration, we not only advanced to the subworld 002, but also obtained a lot of secrets. Legend has it that the master of that place is not constant, it can be fought for. At first, I only suspected it, but since you have met a new successor, that is to say, this legend is likely to be true. Father God, do you want to? We need the power to move forward. Let me ask, if we have the power of that place, do we still need anything else? Matt was silent. She couldn't see many things clearly. She had been sleeping in the tomb of Sun City for too long. She didn't know how long her father god and the pillar gods had been exploring in the crack of the dimension, but this time, she found that the pillar gods seemed to be a little different from the past. She felt a strangeness and uneasiness. Father God. When I made this transaction, I felt that terrifying power, as if it was strangling my throat. I couldn't resist. Since the owner can be changed, there must be a way to fight for it. If we don't reach the origin, the new era will only disappear in an instant like the old era. Those who achieve great things are ruthless. No one is destined by the heavens. Nobles, generals, and generals are all equal. My daughter, I learned this sentence from a cultivator. Do you understand its meaning? Matt lowered her head and didn't say anything. Sun God Ra didn't urge her and just silently hurried on. Finally, Goddess Mat let out a sigh of relief and softly said, "Ever since Father and the others left, I have been sleeping in the scale until one day," she slowly told the story about herself. Quit school? Teacher Pu Lin was looking at Claudia, one of the few students in the class whom he rather liked, in astonishment in the teacher's office building of the academy. This was a smart child, the kind that was very suitable for doing research silently. Of course, the motive for entering the School of Theology in the beginning was not because she really liked theology. "Teacher, you misunderstood." Claudia shook her head and said, "I just plan to give up on the School of Theology and focus on the School of Mathematics from now on." It seems that student Claudia seems to have solved the problem in her heart. Teacher Pu Lin smiled faintly. He discovered that this classmate who was usually silent seemed to be a little different. "No matter what, since it's your decision, then go ahead and work hard." Her eyes were different, as if it was another person, but it was still her. Maybe she just became more confident. "Teacher Poulin, I am very grateful for your teaching in the past 6 months. Claudia smiled slightly. "Although I don't plan to study theology, if there is time, I think I will come to listen to your class again. After all, your class made me feel like I was listening to a story." Teacher Pu Lin stared blankly and subconsciously rubbed his nose. He smiled and said, "Thank you very much." Claudia nodded with a smile, and then walked out of the office with light steps. Teacher Pu Lin smiled, and then packed up his lesson plans, and set off for the classroom. In the corridor of the teaching building that one had to pass to get to the classroom, Teacher Poulin's eyes slightly lit up. "Student Luochio, you finally came to class." Boss Luo smiled slightly, holding a palm-sized container in his hand. "This is a letter, brought back from Egypt. Class first." Teacher Poulin smiled. "Even if you received a gift, if you fail the exam, I still won't give you credit. So strict. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. This chapter is yesterday's copy. Chapter 1575. Mr. Poulin said that he hadn't been to the Butterfly Society for a few days, so after the morning class ended, he hid in the Butterfly Society. His reason was that the quietness here suited him very well. More importantly, he found that he didn't even need to wear gloves in the Butterfly Society. When the white gloves were taken off, he could touch everything in the Butterfly Society. The tables and chairs that were touched didn't decay, and the flowers that were touched didn't wither either. In this place, the power of death in his hands seemed to be isolated. This made Teacher Pu Lin rather excited, and he almost touched all the furnishings in the Butterfly Society. Oh right, the tea made by the president Luochio was delicious. "I've been away from here for a few days. Did anything special happen?" Luochio asked Teacher Pu Lin casually as if they were acquaintances who had known each other for a long time. "Nothing at school." Mr. Poulin blinked. "There shouldn't be anything outside the school either. I don't know what's special for you." "Teacher is very special." Boss Luo smiled. Mr. Poulin shook his head and said, "You know almost everything about me. Logically speaking, I shouldn't be special in your eyes." Boss Luo blinked and said, "Teacher, you haven't told me how you got your ability. When we first met, didn't you say that you were abandoned in front of the church?" Mr. Poulin thought for a while and said slowly, "This ability seems to be innate. As I continue to grow, my ability is steadily increasing. But in the end, I don't know why I have this ability. Generally speaking, if it's not a special mutation, it might be inherited from the bloodline." Boss Luo asked casually, "Teacher, have you ever been curious about your parents? Why did they abandon you?" "Of course I'm curious." Poulin rolled his eyes and said, "But I didn't find a way. No one saw who put me in front of the church. After I grew up, I traveled around and met some people with divination abilities. But every time I asked someone to do a divination for me, they would die. After trying a few more times, I gave up." "He even tried a few more times. How many times did he try? How many died?" Seeing that he spoke casually, Boss Luo didn't ask further. For Teacher Pu Lin, who had mastered the power of death, perhaps the life and death of life wasn't as important to him as it was in the eyes of ordinary people. Boss Luo could even imagine Teacher Pu Lin's opinion on the death of those diviners who divined for him. That was their fate. Since fate had arranged for them to welcome death, then even if I hadn't come, they would still have died. That's a pity. Boss Luo nodded. Would you like to have afternoon tea here? It's okay. Pulin shook his head. I don't have classes in the afternoon, and I have some matters to attend to. I'll be leaving the school later. Boss Luo did not ask him to stay. He just sent Teacher Pulin out of the Butterfly Society's door. The Butterfly Society was located in an old school building, and few people would come here. However, at this moment, a figure carrying a cardboard box full of personal belongings passed by the school building and looked up. Boss Luo opened the window and looked down with a smile. It was Claudia. She seemed to have packed her things and was preparing to leave. However, when she saw the window above suddenly open, she was startled at first. Then, when she saw the new male classmate in the class, an indescribable sense of familiarity suddenly welled up in her heart. However, she couldn't put her finger on it, so she simply nodded and left. Boss Luo smiled and returned to the Butterfly Society until her figure finally disappeared into the shade of the trees. There was an old notebook on the table. This was what Professor Xie Jiatu left after he disappeared. The last thing he wrote in this notebook was about the study of Trinity. Past, a present, future. Trinity. At first, Luoqiu thought that what Professor Xie Jiatu wrote was very close to something, but now it seemed to be unrelated. The Trinity that Professor Xie Jiatu studied probably referred to the power of the Libra through what happened in the City of the Sun. The person, the good side of the Libra, and the ugly side of the Libra happened to be the Trinity. Although Professor Xie Jiatu's perception was biased, it was quite impressive that he was able to create a Menno after 600 years as a mortal. But this was not what Luoqiu wanted. Boss Luo shook his head and put the notebook in the drawer. Although the Trinity that Professor Xie Jiatu understood was not the case, this trip to the City of the Sun in the desert was not without gain. At least he got the scales of good and evil. Although Boss Luo just wanted to see if there was anything special about the soul that was divided by the Libra's power, the Libra he finally got was an unexpected surprise. One of the 7 sacred artifacts of the Eternal Empire, a part of the Eternal Wheel. Boss Luo wanted to get more information through the altar, but the price of the altar was too high. Boss Luo planned to slowly explore it himself. After so many things happened, he seemed to still be the Luoqiu who liked to go to the supermarket when it was on sale. Nothing seemed to have changed much. After packing up the things in the Butterfly Society, Boss Luo left here. At first, Luoqiu felt that school life seemed to be good. But now, he suddenly felt that this good life probably came from the company of Miss Maid. Yu Yi hadn't come back yet, and he suddenly felt dull today. Master, are you there? When he went out, Luoqiu heard a voice with a hint of flattery in his heart, Taiyinzi's voice. What's the matter? Master, I seem to remember something again. In the next moment, Boss Luo closed the door of the Butterfly Society and hung the sign of Occults. Then, he appeared in the main God Mountain. At this time, Taiyinzi was eating a piece of authentic Changsha stinky tofu with his mouth wide open under the service of several pretty ladies. His mouth was full of oil and the smell of fragrant permeated the air. By the way, among the maids there was one who looked like Qin Chuyu. Master, please listen to my explanation. You must listen to my explanation. I'm not slacking off. He didn't want to explain why there was a maid who looked like Qinchu. Boss Luo couldn't help shaking his head. At that time, what was the reason that turned him into a Black Soul envoy? Boss Luo couldn't help but fall into contemplation. Master, sit. Taiyinzi took the chair from a servant and came to Luoqiu's side, Master, what kind of tea do you want to drink? No need. Luocha waved his hand casually. After glancing at the main god mountain, he said indifferently, Tell me, what did you remember this time? At this time, Taiyinzi asked all the servants and maids to leave, and then took out a folded rice paper from his arms. He licked his fingers and then opened the paper carefully. I was afraid that I would forget, so I wrote it down immediately. Master, please have a look. 4 words were written on the paper. Eternal wheel, eternal wheel? Luocha frowned slightly in surprise. He had just returned from Sun City and the Libra he got was a part of the eternal wheel. Taiyinzi thought of the eternal wheel, which was really a subtle coincidence. Yes, it's the eternal wheel. Taiyinzi looked serious at this time. I've been thinking hard these days, so that I can think of useful information for Master as soon as possible. Finally, thanks to Master's great fortune, the heavens don't disappoint the faithful, and the heavens pity me. What else? Boss Luo had to interrupt and ask, Is there anything else about the eternal wheel? Taiyinzi blinked. No, I just thought of the eternal wheel. Boss Luo blinked, got up and left without saying a word. Taiyinzi suddenly threw himself on the ground with tears and snot and hugged him. Master, it's not that I don't want to think of it, but I can't help it. Recently, I don't know why, but I always feel that I can't concentrate. Master, you should know that these things are like going to the toilet. When it wants to come, it will naturally come. If it doesn't come, no matter how much I squat, it won't come out. I've been working very hard. So, what was the reason that he was turned into a black soul envoy at that time? Boss Luo gently knocked his forehead. Say it, what do you want? I want a holiday. Taiyinzi raised his head pitifully. Boss Luo said expressionlessly, Black Soul's holiday can't be exchanged with merits, you should know this. Taiyinzi hurriedly said, Master, you misunderstood, I don't want that kind of holiday. I want to go back to the modern world. You miss. You harmed me. How can there be such an old job in the world to get a minute of rest? This old Taoist. I also have my dignity. For some reason, a familiar feeling suddenly appeared in front of him. A certain red genie's figure flashed in front of Boss Luo's eyes. You want a chance to go out? Boss Luo stopped and looked down. Taiyinzi suddenly shivered, but in order to get a chance to go out, he gritted his teeth and nodded. That's good. Boss Luo pondered for a moment and suddenly nodded. Okay, from now on, you and Taisetsu will temporarily switch. Taiyinzi was overjoyed. He didn't expect happiness to come so suddenly. He hurriedly kowtowed and thanked Boss Luo. Master, thank you for your kindness. Boss Luo waved his hand. I want you to go out, but not to play. I have another task for you. Taiyinzi opened his mouth, then lowered his head and bit his fingers. In the end, he was tired of staying in the main god mountain and wanted to go out, so he said respectfully, It's my honor to be able to work for you, Master. Master, you don't know this, but this old Taoist has been thinking about how to solve your problems all the time. Now that the opportunity has finally come, this old Taoist is really moved to tears. What kind of task do you want me to do? Boss Luo said indifferently, Go to the crack in the dimension and find a way to sneak into the organization of the Supreme Beings. Help me find out the whereabouts of the Supreme Beings in the Supreme Beings organization. Taiyinzi blinked and said subconsciously, Super what? The Supreme Beings organization. Super, what's that again? The Supreme Beings organization. What's that again? To go or not to go? Go, Boss Luo nodded and said, I've already informed Taisetsu, he'll come in and talk to you later. About sneaking into the Supreme Beings organization, you can ask Taisetsu, he's more experienced. Also, if you remember more about the Eternal Wheel, you can end this mission early. Taiyinzi sat on the ground with dull eyes. Boss Luo had already left. Not long after, Taisetsu entered the main god mountain and found Taiyinzi still sitting on the ground with tears streaming down his face. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Brother, what's wrong? What happened?" Teinzi looked up helplessly, his beard trembling because of the twitching of his lips. "I'm touched." Taisetsu nodded and said, "Master asked me to come here to replace you. He also said that you might have something to ask me." "What is it?" Teinzi took a deep breath. After thinking for a while, he waved his hand. The sage-like Taoist robe was gone. He changed into a checkered shirt and close-fitting jeans. In addition, he wore an afro hairstyle. "Brother Daz, look at me. Do I have the potential to be a snitch?" After Daz thought about it, he said with a serious face after a while, "Brother, there is a saying, you look like a snitch like this. Trust me, you're definitely the most outstanding traitor in the village." "Really?" Teinzi's mood seemed to have improved a lot. "Hearing you say that, I'm relieved. Brother Taisetsu, I heard that you're familiar with the supreme level organizations? Can you introduce me to them?" "Master." He couldn't be planning to let Teinzi blend in and become a traitor, right? For a moment, Taisetsu didn't know why, but he wasn't worried about Teinzi. Instead, he was worried about the supreme-level individuals in the supreme-level organization. It seemed as if Teinzi had a very special talent. No matter what, he was always able to turn the other party's good hand into a bad one. Hashtag 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 PS 3/60ths. Chapter 1576. This time, Teinzi didn't make any mistakes. The handover between him and Taisetsu went smoothly. It was unknown what this guy was thinking. Before leaving the main god mountain, he enthusiastically handed over the right to use the magic mirror to Taisetsu. At the same time, after careful consideration, Taisetsu finally told Teinzi that if he arrived at the Eternal Night Palace of the Transcendent Organization and met a person named Musashi, he could mention Taisetsu's name. Of course, Teinzi thanked him again and again. This old guy actually understood more or less that it was hard to please the boss if he only relied on those unreliable memories in his head and didn't know when he would squeeze out a little bit of memory. According to the current market, it was hard to please the boss. Didn't he see that the team of Black Soul envoys was slowly growing? Chen Mingming and Zhao Luo had such a good start, but they were still working so hard. He was the first Black Soul envoy that the boss had personally converted. How could he continue to be a salted fish? Teinzi didn't know where his ambition came from. This was the first time he entered the crevice of the dimension. Standing on the desolate floating land, Teinzi miraculously hoped that he could make some achievements this time. Black Soul King, I will definitely be the Black Soul King. The desolate land suddenly shook, and a huge black shadow suddenly emerged from the ground. It was an incomparably huge monster that looked like a sandworm. Its round mouth was filled with densely packed, sharp teeth. Traces of sticky green saliva dripped onto Teinzi's head. Teinzi opened his mouth and thought for a while. Then, he coldly laughed and waved his sleeves. Help! He couldn't win, so he ran for his life. This guy, there should be no problem. In the distance, on a stone mountain, Taisetsu rubbed his chin. Not to mention whether Teinzi could successfully sneak into the Transcendent Organization, whether he could safely arrive at the Eternal Night Palace, seemed to be a problem. Shaking his head, Taisetsu turned around and left. The boss only asked him to send, watch, Teinzi into the crack between dimensions, but he didn't ask him to help him all the way. His own people wouldn't act on their own accord. Taisetsu mingled in the underworld, so he knew very well that the bosses hated it the most when their subordinates acted on their own accord. Moreover, Taisetsu had already told Teinzi that if he successfully arrived at the Eternal Night Palace, he could mention his name in front of Musashi. That was the best. Anyway, do your best. According to the boss's instructions, after closing the crack between dimensions, Taisetsu entered the main god mountain and temporarily replaced Teinzi as the Moon Master God. However, to the servants on the main god mountain, The new Master God was completely different from the previous Master God, who was extremely extravagant. "You all can go and rest. I don't need anyone to serve me." The servants were in fear and trepidation. After all, they didn't have real life. Strictly speaking, they were just NPCs in the Master God game. If they weren't serving the Master God on the main God Mountain, they wouldn't even know what they were supposed to do. Taisetsu only wanted to stay on the mountain by himself. After thinking for a while, he said, "I've seen your panel. You all seem to have the ability to level up as well? If you don't have anything else to do, then go down the mountain and level up." Thus, the servants accepted the order, tidied up, and went down the mountain in tears, walking on the continent. The new Master God probably wants us to spread the glory of the Master God on the continent. Yes, the Moon Master God is too shameless. Now, many new gods have appeared on the continent. The mortals have gradually forgotten about the existence of the Moon Master God Mountain. We are the servants of the gods. We can't let the prestige of the main God Mountain decline day by day. God knows what model Taiyinzi used to create this batch of servants. On the day they went down the mountain, the chief steward of the servants on the main God Mountain called himself the Pope. The Moon Holy Church was quietly born subworld number 003, Modern World, Britain. On the streets of a quiet town, Teacher Poulin carried a small bag. When it was close to dusk, he came to the front of the town's church. He happened to see my Lotta holding a broom, looking like he had nothing to live for as he cleaned the church's courtyard. My Lotta had been living in the church for a few days. It seemed like he had adapted to the life of the church. "You seem to be in a good mood today." Teacher Poulin greeted my Lotta through the iron fence in the courtyard. He then raised the bag in his hand and shook his head, smiling. Consolation. My Lotta snorted coldly, but he had the urge to beat this guy up. It would be strange if he was in a good mood. For a few days, he could only stay in the church. Because he had lost his ability, he had no way to deal with the mortals in the modern world who could use modern weapons. Once he left the church, he would probably face the danger of being arrested by the police. Of course, it wasn't because the church provided free food and accommodation. How could the great Soth god race, the descendant of the great god of war Ares, bow down because of such small benefits? Fresh out of the oven, Teacher Poulin continued. My Lotta couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Right now, he didn't have any strength, but the daily consumption of his body was still shocking. The free meals provided by the church were simply not enough, but he couldn't bring himself to ask the priests of the church if they could give him more food. "No one asked you to console me." My Lotta snorted coldly. "It's unnecessary." Teacher Poulin smiled and took 2 steps back. He then threw the bag in his hand into the courtyard and waved his hand. "Do your best, you look really handsome when you work hard." The corner of my Lotta's eyes twitched slightly. Finally, Teacher Poulin walked away. He sighed and silently picked up the consolation gift. He found a tree to sit down and silently gnawed on it. "Great God of darkness, when will your most loyal believer be able to?" He sighed heavily and took out the crystal given by the God of darkness. This crystal, other than the reaction on the first day, didn't have any other reaction. This made my Lotta ponder whether Pluto had already left this town. "If I can contact my race in the inhuman domain," my Lotta thought while gnawing on the bread. Now, his power was sealed by the powerful old human mage, Uncle Pick. It was very inconvenient and his movements were hindered. The only thing he could do now was to ask for help from the god race. But now, he didn't have any ability. It was impossible for him to activate his private coordinates and open the inhuman domain communication. Lotta, are you there? Can you come over and help me carry some things?" Suddenly, the voice of the old priest came. My Lotta snorted lightly and pretended not to hear. "Lotta? Are you there? I am preparing dinner. There are guests coming tonight. I can't take the time now." "Lotta? I'll go now." My Lotta sighed, but he couldn't help but keep an eye out. Guess? Other than worship, very few people would come to this church. Even those who entered the church to repent were very few. My Lotta couldn't help but complain about the customs of this small town. The humans in this broken place seemed to be very friendly by nature, so friendly that my Lotta felt that it was unreal. Between people, they were like family. Although this small town was very small and they all knew each other, this degree of harmony still made my Lotta feel that it was unreal. Although he had met a few hooligans in this small town in the beginning who had provoked him, it seemed that it was only these few young people. This place was too peaceful. Shaking his head, my Lotta was about to move out to help the priest carry things when he keenly felt something. A line of sight. Outside the iron fence of the church's courtyard, there was an unusual line of sight looking in. Although his power had been sealed, my Lotta still had some strong sense of touch. He secretly adjusted his breathing and suddenly turned around. What sharp senses! My Lotta frowned at the same time. He saw that outside the iron fence of the courtyard, a tall figure was standing at an unknown time. It was really tall. Compared to him who had the bloodline of Ares, the god of war, his physique was even stronger. Not only that, the other party was actually an old man. The grayish-white stubble was quite eye-catching, and the old wrinkles on his face. But what was this strong physique? You are Stella's student? The tall and sturdy old man suddenly asked curiously, when did Stella take in a student? But your physique seems to be quite good. Stella. The name of the church's priest. In that case, this tall and sturdy old man was probably the guest that Father Stella was going to invite tonight? My Lotta frowned. He was naturally not Father Stella's student, but for a moment, he did not know how to answer his identity. He simply did not say anything, and after giving him a glance, he turned around and left. The tall and sturdy old man outside the iron fence shook his head and laughed lightly. You have quite the character, but I don't know how strong you are. Probably due to the aggressive nature in his bloodline, my Lotta found that he could not ignore this kind of provocation. He clenched his fist, and his gaze suddenly became sharp. The tall and sturdy old man's interest was immediately piqued, and he clicked his tongue and said, Your eyes tell me that your hands are not clean. I am very curious, why would Stella let you live in God's place? My Lotta sneered, and stuffed the last mouthful of cognac into his mouth, and walked towards the iron fence with the broom in his hand. Lotta, so you are here. But at this moment, Father Stella's voice came from behind. He was still holding a cooking spoon in his hand, and wearing an apron. Have the things been moved? My Lotta took a deep breath, and turned around to look at Father Stella. The priest blinked his eyes in confusion, and my Lotta then said indifferently, Go now. My Lotta silently left the courtyard, and Father Stella shook his head with a worried look. At the same time, the tall and sturdy old man had already walked into the courtyard. He jumped in. Father Stella said snappily, I remember that the front door of the church is never locked. The old man shrugged and said, You know that I don't like to walk under his nose. Wasco. The name of this tall and sturdy old man and his origin instantly emerged in Father Stella's mind. One of the members of the Holy Knights of the Holy Church, who had not retired at the age of 96. His powerful body made a group of young Holy Knights blush with shame. Currently, he still maintained his status as a high-end combat power of the Holy Church. This guy, who is he? The tall and sturdy old man. Wasco suddenly asked at this moment. I smell a strong smell of blood on his hands. Father Stella did not care and said, No one's hands are clean. This is the church. As long as there is a need, we will open the door for them. Lotta was temporarily placed here by a friend of mine. Although this guy's temper is a bit irritable, his nature should not be bad. You, on the other hand, came all the way from the Holy Land to this remote place. You can't say that you are here for a vacation, right? How can that be? Isn't there still an old friend like you here? Wasco smiled and said, The Holy Land is now full of young people. I couldn't find anyone to talk to, so I came out to visit an old friend. Am I not welcome? I don't believe you. Father Stella looked at him expressionlessly. Wasco withdrew his smile and suddenly said seriously, "Recently, a lot of things have happened in the Holy Church." Before he finished speaking, Father Stella directly shook his head and said, "I am just a retired soldier. Now I am already too busy to take care of this small church every day. I am not in the mood to care about the affairs of those big shot." Wasco seemed to have known the other party's attitude and was not angry. Father Stella shook his head. "I am very happy that you are here to visit me, old friend Wasco, so I personally prepared dinner tonight. I hope we can have a pleasant and relaxing gathering." "Oh no, the grilled fish is about to be burnt." With that, Stella hurriedly turned around and left. Wasco suddenly said at this time, "About half a year ago, the holy relic guarded by the Pecoris monastery was robbed, and none of the monks in the monastery survived. Almost a month after the incident, this incident happened in the Holy Church, because the person who robbed the holy relic forged the enchantment, creating the illusion that everything in the monastery was normal." Stella subconsciously stopped in his tracks. "Stella, you should know what the loss of the holy relic means to the Holy Church," Wasco said slowly at this time. "Through investigation, the investigation team of the Holy Church finally determined who robbed the holy relic and massacred the monastery." "Who is it?" Father Stella finally turned around. "Black Order," Wasco said slowly. Father Stella was silent for a while before he shook his head and said, "The fish is still burnt." Chapter 1577. After a while, Father Strahl came out with a plate of burnt fish, his face expressionless. Wasco, whose body size was twice that of Father Stella, was stroking a golden cat that was dozing off, showing a look of enjoyment. "Tear off the burnt part of the skin, the inside is still edible." Wasco looked at the failed dish in front of him indifferently, reached out and picked it up to eat. "I've never been picky about food, this is the secret of longevity." This guy could still be so healthy at the age of 96, of course, he had a secret, but it was obviously not because he was not picky about food. Father Stella untied his apron and sat down. After pouring himself a glass of water, he said slowly, "The holy relic of the Pecoris monastery has been taken away for more than half a year. I'm curious how the Holy Church can tolerate it until now. This makes me wonder if this holy relic is a fake made by a big country." Recently, something happened in the Holy Church. Wasco stopped stroking the cat and said seriously, "We have been unable to listen to the gospel of the Lord for a long time." "What's going on?" Father Stryker frowned. Wasco shook his head and said, "I'm not sure. Even a group of holy petitioners who were originally going to be sent to heaven are now staying in the Holy Land. This is probably the first case since the birth of the Holy Church. Now, there are many voices in the Holy Church. You know, Stella, I've never been interested in this kind of fight." Father Stella did not comment. What was lost is the holy relic, not something else. Since when is the fight between factions more important than the holy relic? "Stella." Wasco came closer and whispered, "Speculation, just a speculation. We speculate that something you and I can't imagine might have happened in heaven. In the past 6 months, many things have happened in the Holy Church, far more than you can imagine, and all of this seems to be related to the sudden disappearance of the soul of a petitioner last year. In Russia, she was a devout believer, with a pure soul, one of the few high quality in recent years. But after her death, her soul was not received. This matter attracted the attention of the angels in heaven, who were in charge of receiving people, and they sent angels to investigate. In this matter, there was a young priest involved, and the one that the angels were interrogating was this young priest." "What's the problem?" Father Stella said angrily. "Apart from the problem, how does the interrogation of a suspect involve the Black Order? That's the key." Wasco thought for a while and said, "That angel was unable to get an answer from this young priest. But because the time of descent was almost up, it had to return. But as soon as it left, the monastery was immediately attacked by the Black Order, and then the holy relic was taken away. The entire monastery was killed. The Black Order even asked their priests to pretend to be people from the monastery. Guess what happened next? I guess if you don't hurry up, you won't have dinner tonight, Father Stella said indifferently. Wasco stared at him for a while, then said, when the angel in charge of the investigation descended again, it was attacked by the Black Order disguised as people from the Holy Church, dead. Father Stella's expression changed slightly. Wasco said in a deep voice, Stella, a descending angel, died in the human world. Moreover, he died under the careful planning of the Holy Church's enemy, the Black Order. This shame was undoubtedly a resounding slap on the faces of the higher-ups of the church. Later, they learned that the holy relic was lost, and then they couldn't contact heaven. What about the young priest involved in the case? Father Stella suddenly asked. That's where the strange part is. Wasco thought for a while and said, according to the investigation, this priest was born in the Pecoris monastery. His godfather was called Morgi, who was also an ascetic in the monastery. But when the investigation team of the Holy Church arrived, they didn't find the body of this young priest among the many corpses that were dug up. But according to the records at that time, this young priest should have been imprisoned when the Black Order attacked the monastery. However, after the Black Order successfully killed the angel and left, this young priest also mysteriously disappeared. He might know the whole story. Father Stella frowned. Perhaps, when the Black Order attacked the monastery, he took advantage of the chaos to escape. No, if he escaped, he should have contacted the nearest church to ask for support immediately. It's impossible for him to delay until the investigation team appeared. Could it be a betrayal? This is the most likely possibility, Wasco said seriously. Even the news of the holy relic in the monastery was leaked by this young priest. He is more likely to be an accomplice of the Black Order's invasion of the monastery. Of course, these are all just speculations, unless we can find him. Morgi, Father Stella muttered. I've heard of him, an ascetic in Pecoris. His character is enough to be remembered. If it's his godfather, he should also be a person with strong faith. Listen, Stella, Wasco said in a low voice, I hope more than anyone that there is no traitor among us. Just Amund alone is enough to humiliate us. But even if he shamefully left the embrace of the Lord, at least he chose to be a knight in the end and didn't do evil. But if this young priest is in cahoots with the Black Order, we must eliminate him as soon as possible. Father Stella suddenly sneered. If that's the case, I'm also someone who shames you. You've come to the wrong place. Wasco took a deep breath and said, Stella, when Amund betrayed the church for his child, who fell in love with a vampire, you, who was in charge of intercepting him, let him go in the end. I don't blame you. You've already asked for forgiveness and spread the glory of our Lord in this remote place for 20 years. It's enough to atone for your sins. This time, I came here from the Holy Church. One of my goals is to bring you back. Stella said indifferently, I'm just an old man who will doze off when preaching to the believers for a week. What can I do? Look, I'm so clumsy that I can even burn a grilled fish. The Holy Church needs you, Stella, Wasco said earnestly. Father Stella lowered his eyebrows and looked at Jean Jian, who was acting cute at his feet and begging to be stroked, and said indifferently, Tom needs me too. Can't you bring your cat back with you? Wasco frowned. Father Stella shook his head and said, No, it won't be acclimatized, and it can't leave the bench in the confessional of the church, or it won't sleep. I'll help you carry the confessional back. Father Stella said again, No, except for the vegetables planted in the garden here, Tom won't eat any other vegetables. You told me that cats like to eat vegetables. Fine. I'll carry this yard back too. Wasco's forehead was slightly green. Father Stella still shook his head and said, The air won't work either. If it leaves here, Tom will refuse to breathe, and it will die. Old man, enough is enough. Wasco was almost gritting his teeth as he spoke. A majestic holy power was flowing on his muscles that seemed to be made of steel at this time. Father Stella said unhurriedly, "There are still a few knights guarding here. Although they are just insignificant little knights, you don't care at all. Well, even if the 12 knights come, you definitely won't care. But if you attract the attention of the entire knight mechanism, I think you'll still—" "Oh, Wasco, I knew you can keep your composure." Wasco stood up directly. "I'll come again, I'll stay here for the next few days. Stella, I still say the same thing, now is an eventful time, the Holy Church needs you, and the Godly Might Prison needs you even more." "But I don't need you." "Humph." Wasco pushed the door open angrily. Father Stella shook his head, then began to clean up the table, but at this time, Tom ran all the way out, jumped to the edge of the window, and kept shouting. Father Stella didn't look back, but said indifferently, "You must be hungry, come and clean up, and get ready to eat. I know you haven't eaten enough these days, so I made a little more today. But the guy who was going to stay for dinner just now left, so you can eat more." Outside the window, Miles Lotta stood up with a cold face. He didn't go through the door, but directly jumped in from the window, but his eyes were locked on Father Stella. The priest smiled slightly, and brought out a lot of food from the kitchen. He acted as if nothing had happened, carried Tom to the table, and fed him some milk. "Just now you—" Miles Lotta couldn't resist the curiosity in his heart, and asked tentatively. "Poulin sent you to me, I didn't ask anything, and I don't intend to ask." Father Stella smiled. Miles Lotta gave a soft hum, lowered his head, and began to eat. "Happy meal." Stella smiled faintly, then drew a cross before his chest. "Amen." After sending some condolences to Miles Lotta, Teacher Poulin quickly came to the town's hospital. He would come here once a day, and every time he came, he would bring some fresh soil into the intensive care unit, and apply it to Mr. Smith and his wife Deborah. Today was the same. Mr. Smith appeared to be asleep, lying on the edge of his wife Deborah's bed. This man was probably getting more and more exhausted with each passing day. His wife was still unconscious, and his missing son Joe was still missing. These terrible things had caused this man, who should have been at his most energetic, to have a face full of exhaustion. If it weren't for the doctor who came to the ward every day to tell him that the fetus his wife was carrying was still healthy, Mr. Smith probably wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. Teacher Poulin stood to the side, quietly looking at the couple who had been through a lot. He didn't know when it started, but he seemed to have gotten rid of his ill-fated relationship with Mr. Smith's family. He had always been traveling around, without a fixed residence, without any purpose. This small town was the first place he had lived in for more than half a year. This place always gave him a special feeling. He felt as though he knew Mr. Smith's family, especially when he first met Mr. Smith's family, at the scene of the car accident. This ordinary family should have died in the car accident, but because of his arrival, they miraculously survived. That was the first time in his life that Poulin did something that went against the laws of nature. He couldn't tell what the reason was. Perhaps there was a hidden meaning behind this matter. Thus, he decided to live here and become a member of this small town, like an ordinary person. By interacting with this family, he might be able to understand something, right? Teacher Poulin looked at Mrs. Deborah's belly. The child had enough weeks, and a new life was waiting to break out of the cocoon in the mother's body. He couldn't help but stretch out his hand and gently put it on Mrs. Deborah's belly, through the patient's clothes, the quilt, and his own white gloves. He didn't really touch it in the end. "Joe! Joe!" Mr. Smith, who was sleeping, suddenly called the name of his missing child in his dream. Teacher Poulin instantly withdrew his hand. Mr. Smith woke up from his dream and looked around the ward. As usual, only his wife was still lying on the bed. "Just now, did someone come?" Mr. Smith glanced at the cabinet beside the bed and realized that there was an additional item here at some point in time. Mr. Smith opened it and realized that the food bag was mostly filled with his favorite food. Probably someone, Mr. Smith thought to himself. Everyone in this town has always gotten along very well. His mood seemed to be better. Mr. Smith slowly exhaled, taking out his wife's hand from the quilt and gently wiping it. Was it an illusion? In front of the hospital, Wasco, who had left the church, suddenly stopped in his tracks. He looked at the small hospital in front of him with some hesitation. Just now, he seemed to have smelled something unusual. The smell of a dead body. But this smell disappeared very quickly, and he could only smell the fragrance of the earth in the end. Wasco couldn't help but shake his head and quickly left. Not long after, Wasco came to the door of an apartment. He directly pushed the door open and walked in. At this time, the 2 men and 2 women in the apartment saw Wasco coming in, and they immediately straightened their backs and raised their heads, not daring to breathe. Wasco looked at the 4 young men and women. They were all knights of the Holy Church, heroes of the Holy Knight Reserve. Obviously, other than looking for Father Stella, he came to this small town for another reason. Hashtag PS. 4/60. Chapter 1578. Since he didn't have dinner, Wasco picked up a hamburger and started munching on it. This old knight of the Holy Church was just like what he said. He wasn't a picky eater, even though the hamburger in his hand was already eaten by the young knight. "Sir, there's still a new one," the young knight who had his share eaten said politely. Wasco acted like he didn't hear anything. He took the Coke from the young knight and drank a few mouthfuls. Then, he wiped the sauce off his lips with his palm. "How's the investigation on the people I asked you to investigate?" The young knight could only quickly report. For the past few months, the Holy Church had been searching for the Black Order. However, the Black Order had always been well hidden. They hid in the darkness, preparing to bring disaster to the Holy Church at any moment. The reason why they came to this small town was because they had discovered some clues that might lead them to the whereabouts of the Black Nunnery. Originally, this was just a mission for a few young holy knights. Vasco, on the other hand, had suddenly joined them with unknown motives. "I've investigated it." The young knight sorted out his thoughts and said slowly, "Sure enough, these people were indeed students at the University of St. Andrews. They knew the British Prime Minister, who was also studying at the University of St. Andrews. Of course, the former Prime Minister was just an ordinary student at that time." Wasco nodded and began to organize the information that the Holy Church had. Just a few weeks ago, a very serious inhuman case happened in the capital of Britain. It led to a riot in the city. This incident was caused by the orcs. In the end, the Magicians' Association intervened and ended it. Ordinary people's memories were washed away by the rain of oblivion, but Inhuman didn't. There was no such thing as a wall that didn't have a crack. The riot in the Fog City had already appeared in the ears of the Inhuman world on the second day. Wasco took out a few photos from the documents. In the photos, there were a few warriors wearing strange exoskeleton armors. The Fianna, part of the Bosnia warriors. This group of warriors was the first to be built by the Britons themselves. It was a secret weapon that was used to fight against the traditional knights. Unfortunately, the Fianna, that was built with a huge amount of manpower and material resources, was easily defeated when she fought against the current Orc king, Caesar. Not only that, but the Prime Minister had also lost his life in that calamity. As for the cause of death, the British government did not announce it, but the Holy Church was not concerned about what the cause of death was. What the Church was concerned about was the equipment of that warrior group. Dragon Rider armor. 10 years ago, Wasco said slowly, the Black Order once developed a special armor that greatly increased the combat power of ordinary people. If it wasn't for the fact that it couldn't be mass-produced with the ability of that armor, the Black Order would definitely have a huge impact on the Holy Church. 10 years later, the Dragon Rider armor appeared in the secret department of the British government. The young knight nodded and compared the mysterious armor of the Black Order from 10 years ago with the Dragon Rider armor of the warrior group from Wasco's hands. He said seriously, although the appearance is very different, based on the basic structure, they seem to be related. After all, 10 years have passed. If the Black Order is still developing this armor, it is very likely that it will look like this Dragon Rider armor. The Dragon Rider armor in the hands of the British warrior group has a lot to do with the armor of the Black Order back then. Wasco said seriously, according to the data, the person responsible for developing this Dragon Rider armor graduated from this university. Although the Prime Minister is already dead, he was also a student of this university. Although there is no direct evidence, there is reason to believe that there may be clues about the Black Order hidden in this university. So, you must move around more these few days. Don't let anything suspicious slip by. Yes. The young knights hurriedly saluted. Wasco nodded and prepared to go inside to rest, but before he left, he suddenly turned around and asked, "Right? Is there a way to take away the air here? I'm not talking about 1 or 2 cans, but a lot." The young knight stared blankly, then looked at his companion with a dumbfounded expression. Finally, he braced himself and said, "Then, how about we get a few more cans of compressed air?" Unexpectedly, Wasco nodded at this time. "Sounds like a way. Your answer is not bad. Keep up the good work." Yes, seeing that the church's senior holy knight had finally entered the room to rest, the young holy knights slowly let out a sigh of relief. They felt as if the long flow of time had suddenly come to an end. The young knight who didn't even dare to breathe in front of Wasco breathed a sigh of relief. He also became more comfortable and less reserved. "Why do you think Lord Wasco came to this remote place with our team this time? We're just doing an ordinary investigation. It stands to reason that such a big shot shouldn't accompany us, right?" "I know a little about this. Tell us." The young men hurriedly approached each other to the extent that their heads were about to touch. "I heard that there's a powerful priest in the Holy Church who lives in seclusion in this place. It seems to be a high-level secret. I heard it once by accident when the hierarch let it slip." "Seclusion? A powerful priest? How powerful is he? How could he make Lord Wasco come here in person?" "It's said that he's the former warden of the Godly Might prison. Later, he was removed because he secretly let a traitor knight go. Then, he came here to live in seclusion," one of the knights said in surprise. "Even if he's a traitor knight, he's still the warden of the Godly Might prison. How could he be removed so easily?" It's said that this traitor was not an ordinary knight but a member of the Knights Templar. He was a comrade-in-arms of Lord Wasco in the same era. Later, this traitor knight even joined the Knight Organization of Britain. I'm afraid that he exposed a lot of secrets of the Holy Church. Therefore, the situation is quite serious." The young knights couldn't help but look at each other in bewilderment. "I say, why do I suddenly feel that this task is not an ordinary investigation task, but a hidden task in the nightmare mode?" At this moment, the door of the room was suddenly smashed by something, making a loud noise. Wasco shouted in the room, "You pieces of garbage! Go out and investigate if you're energetic." Everyone was as silent as cicadas in cold weather and hurriedly fled the apartment. The apartment became quiet all of a sudden. Inside the room, Wasco simply took off his coat and sat in front of the mirror. At this moment, the mirror began to change. The surface of the mirror seemed to have melted, and a human face floated out little by little. Stella's attitude is very tough. It seems that there is no way to persuade him to return in a short time. Wasco looked at the human face in the mirror and said slowly, "As expected." The human face said indifferently, "Back then, the church only criticized him but did not punish him further. It was he who left the Godly Might prison in private and came to this place. You have known each other for many years. Naturally, you know his character." "I'll look for him again." Wasco sighed slowly. The human face in the mirror said, It would be best if you can summon Stella back, but there's no need to force it. Stella has a firm and loyal belief. This is something that cannot be doubted. You can be at ease. This time, you have to focus on investigating the black religious congregation as well as another matter. Don't worry, I will. Wasco nodded. The human face in the mirror immediately said, according to the information, Farlier has been released from prison in private. The 12 evilest nights in history is like an unstable bomb. He may be hiding somewhere in Britain. You have to be more careful. Don't worry. If there is a chance, I also want to fight this legendary Mad Knight. Wasco laughed softly. Farlier, the 12 evilest knights in history. But before that, he was the strongest knight in history. The 12 Knights of the Round Table and the Temple Knights of the Church were also knights in name. But for the past 100 years, Farlier's name had always suppressed the entire Temple Knight. Although they were the servants of God, but whether they were convinced in their hearts, perhaps only they themselves knew. Don't complicate matters. The human face in the mirror knew Wasco's character very well. At this time, after repeatedly reminding him, he sighed and said, "Our belief may be facing an unprecedented challenge. The Black Order's activity may be just a sign. The real enemy is still behind us." Club. Wasco was deep in thought. But the mirror had returned to its original state. Wasco took a deep breath and then walked to the window. He knelt down in front of the window. Before becoming a Temple Knight, he was a devout believer. Naturally, he did not lack the daily homework of praying. Fog City. In the former base of the Fianna Warrior Regiment. Why the former? It was like this. Since the Prime Minister died in the riot in Fog City, this base, which was built by the former Prime Minister, had been absorbed by the royal family and then incorporated into the Knight organization. Under the instructions of Her Majesty, the former Fianna Warrior Regiment was not abolished. Instead, it began to be rebuilt. As for the few warriors who survived the riot, they were the coaches of the rebuilt New Warrior Regiment. The rebuilding of Fianna was done after careful consideration. In the riot, although the Queen succeeded in centralizing power and reorganizing the Knight organization, a large number of knights in the Knight organization were also sacrificed in this rebellion. The Knight organization was in the stage of being reborn. The future was good, but at present, Britain's inhuman strength had become weak. Therefore, the royal family had to fill the gap in the inhuman field as soon as possible. The rebuilding of Fianna naturally went with the flow. Moreover, although the Prime Minister died, he left a lot of information in Fianna base, which was convenient for Her Majesty now. After all, it was ready-made. By the way, one of the 12 knights, Bedivere, proposed to create the members of Tactical Music Combo, and they were usually trained in this base. Fianna's Dragon Rider armor could protect ordinary people like Will and the others very well. At the same time, through the modification of the Dragon Rider armor, it could greatly improve the Orc siblings' flexibility on the battlefield. Of course, all of this was on the premise that the members of Tactical Music Combo could use the Dragon Rider armor skillfully. Run 10 more laps. Listen, only a strong body and willpower can support you to go further on the battlefield. On the field, in addition to the young people who were newly selected to participate in the rebuilding of the warrior regiment, there were 3 older men running at the back. They were sweating profusely. Will and Will's 2 best friends. Why do we have to undergo physical training here? Where is the hot air Becerra? I want to sing, I want to play the guitar, I don't want to run. The singers are Lael and Oga. I don't care, I'm here to play the guitar, I want to sing, I want to pick up girls. The great demon king is here again. Will's best friend immediately covered his buttock. His movements were awkward, but his face was full of fear as he continued to run. There was a shiny throwing knife stuck in his buttocks at this time. In the beginning, a man dressed as a clown was lying on a beach chair under a big tree, drinking fruit juice while enjoying the beautiful sun. It was the clown, Dagonite, one of the 12 knights of the Round Table. After Sir Hopkins was defeated, Mr. Gareth of the 12 Knights became the new person in charge of the Knight organization, and the other 12 Knights returned to their original positions. Only this Clown Knight was now the chief instructor of Fianna's base and could receive 2 salaries. At this time, a drone slowly flew over. There was a phone hanging on the drone. It landed in front of Dagonite. Mr. Clown, who was enjoying a leisurely afternoon, suddenly put on a sad face and took the phone. The caller was Mr. Gareth, who was working in the Knight organization. "Hey Gareth, you finally remembered that you still owe me a year's salary. Are you ready to transfer it to me? I recently took a fancy to a sports car. There are people from the Holy Church who have illegally entered the country." Mr. Gareth in the organization said directly, "I suspect that they are here for the Dragon Rider armor. Do you have evidence?" Mr. Clown asked curiously. "Not at the moment," Mr. Gareth said in a low voice, "but we found out that he had contact with the Black Order from the information we left in the base. This is true. Dagonite, most of the parts of the Dragon Rider armor were plundered from America in the name of pirates by Caesar, who was secretly funded by the Prime Minister. But the most important design drawings and technical support are still a mystery to this day. What do you want me to do?" Mr. Clown asked directly. Mr. Gareth said in a bad mood, "I want you to investigate, especially the matter of the Holy Church entering the country. Back then, because of the Amonst incident, the Knight organization and the Holy Church had some conflict." "Some conflicts?" Mr. Clown laughed and said, "We are poaching the Holy Church's Knights Templar. Only now did I know that the Holy Church is actually so generous. Are you going or not?" "Don't interrupt." Mr. Gareth's tone became heavier. Mr. Clown said, "I can go. The key is there any travel fee? I recently took a fancy to a villa." "You just said a sports car." "Yes. Buying a villa comes with a sports car. Do you want one too?" Mr. Clown was still smiling. His time was always accompanied by laughter, the laughter of a crying face. Chapter 1579. At night, my Lotta washed the utensils and returned to his room. He had arranged for it to be in the storage room in the backyard of the church. Other than the storage room of the church, there were not many places for my Lotta to move around. Among these few places there was also a single bed with a folding stool. Therefore, the space for him to move around was only about 3 steps. This was the current situation of this descendant of the god of war. "I need to at least activate this communication tool," my Lotta thought to himself. The only way he could think of now was to ask for reinforcements from the Soth God clan in the inhuman domain. Fortunately, although his power had disappeared, some of the tools he brought were still there. One of them was a communication tool with the God clan. In addition, my Lotta also secretly returned to the beach that he first arrived at when he first arrived in the modern world. A few of his companions were killed by a mysterious man wearing a top hat at the beginning, but their corpses were left behind. Therefore, after cleaning up the remains of his companions, my Lotta had a few more tools that he could use. One of them did not even require the use of any power to activate. He could only save these things for the most critical moment. For the current him, these things could save his life when necessary. Unfortunately, the communication tool needed to be activated, and he just happened to lack this power. Perhaps he could ask Father Stella to help him activate the communication tool? From the conversation between the priest and the burly old man that appeared at night, this Father Stella seemed to be from the Holy Church. My Lotta knew a lot about the Holy Church. After all, in the inhuman domain, there was also the existence of the Holy Church. However, in the inhuman domain, the Magician Association was the boss. It was not like in the modern world, the Holy Church was more powerful. But how could he ask Stella to help him? This old priest looked very weak. If he did not eavesdrop on the conversation between him and Wasco, my Lotta would not even know that Father Stella was from the Holy Church. This old man sure is good at hiding himself. But what's going on with this town? Madame Lotta couldn't help but sink into deep thought. Thinking back to this week's experience, he suddenly felt like he was breaking out in cold sweat. First, his clansmen were attacked by the mysterious tall hat man the moment they arrived. Then, he encountered the powerful old mage, Uncle Bick, and his power was sealed. Then, he met Teacher Poulin of unknown origin. Then, he met Father Stella of the Holy Church. Now, even the people of the Holy Church had come personally. Furthermore, the Nether King's whereabouts were also here. Thinking about it this way, could it be that this small town actually hid some secrets that could not be hidden by experts? Lotta suddenly took a deep breath. He had a feeling that he seemed to have come into contact with some kind of danger. When many unreasonable things coincidentally appeared at the same time, it would become a strange monster. Giggle, giggle. There was a knock at the door. Lotta's heart skipped a beat. He rushed to the door of the utility room and pressed his body against the door. Lowering his voice, he asked, "Who's there?" "Lotta, are you asleep?" "Not yet, what's the matter?" "I saw that the light in your room was still on, so I came to see you when I was free. Also, there are some things that I just remembered. I forgot to tell you at dinner." It was Father Stella's voice. Lotta couldn't help but feel surprised. This old priest had already warned him not to try to pry into his affairs during dinner. Could it be that he felt that this was not enough insurance, but to silence him? Taking a deep breath, Lotta quickly took out a small shovel used for planting flowers from the cabinet in the utility room and hid it behind his back. Then, he adjusted his breathing and opened the door. "What's the matter, Father Stella?" Outside the door, Father Stella was simply wearing loose pajamas. He held an oil lamp in one hand and his pet cat, Tom Cruise, in the other. He smiled amiably and said, "Tomorrow is the weekend, the believers in the town will come to worship. If you are interested, you can also participate." "Not interested," Lotta instantly interrupted. Father Stella didn't care and said with a smile, "If that's the case, then can I ask you to help me clear the weeds in the yard during the day? My waist has been a little uncomfortable recently." "I'm going to worship." Lotta instantly felt good. Father Stella suddenly smiled. "Oh, that's great, I believe you will definitely like it. Your brothers and sisters are all good people, you will also like them. See you tomorrow." Lotta directly closed the door. Father Stella, who was outside the door, was not angry at all. He shook his head and slowly left. In the utility room, Lotta suddenly had a thought. The worship of the Holy Church should also be considered as a mass activity, right? If the Holy Church in the inhuman domain carried out a mass activity, it would bless the believers. As for this kind of blessing, to put it bluntly, it was a kind of spell that used holy power. Holy power. I wonder if I can use holy power to activate the communication device in my hand? You are the one who invited me. Lotta sneered and suddenly felt a little happier. He directly lay on the single bed with a folding stool and planned to have a good sleep. Then the folding stool and single bed suddenly collapsed. Lotta's face was clouded over again. The night was boring. For a few days, Luoya didn't wake up from her deep sleep. Since she woke up last time, she had slept for almost a week. But everything about her was so normal. Boss Luo didn't disturb her. He just stayed in the attic for a while and said a few words to the bolster, Mian Mian, then returned to the study room alone. The manor was originally quite lively, but suddenly there was only Boss Luo left. Although Miss Maid was about to come back from her business trip. "Eve, open my private account, I plan to log into the game." There was nothing to do. In fact, a lot of things had happened recently. Boss Luo felt that he needed to relax himself, so he remembered that he had an account in the game. Miss Maid also had one. Naturally, his and Miss Maid's accounts were created as a couple account when they were first created. "Yes, master." When the interface of Boss Luo's account was opened, he thanked Eve and directly logged in. This mode of logging in was different from his usual mode of entering the game directly. After logging in, Boss Luo had the same body as the souls of the so-called Chosen One who logged in the game. All the functions that God's game gave players could be used by Luo Qiu normally. This included the world chat channel between players. He was still a smurf with only a few levels and was not even qualified to walk out of the novice village. He could use ultimate skills and casually punish God's mountain tying over God. What should he do? Boss Luo realized that he hadn't logged into this smurf for a long time, a small mage with only level 4. On this smurf, there were even some so-called novice missions left from the last time. Closing the mission interface, Boss Luo planned to go fishing by himself. Speaking of which, God's game wasn't as big as it was now. When it was first created, Luo Qiu fished for several days in the world of God's game as an experience. He also completed a business deal with the Lan siblings. In other words, after completing the business deal with the Lan siblings, Boss Luo never logged in to this little mage's account again. Jade Fantasy, Era of the Evil Dragon. A huge disaster happened in the world, and there was a gap in history. A mysterious force divided the whole continent into several big layers. Legend had it that as long as the Chosen One reached the top of the continent and stood on the highest peak, he could get a chance to fulfill any wish, anything beyond the limit of belief. How many Chosen One were there on the continent? No one knew. Every day there would be a Chosen One who died in battle, in duels, or even while exploring the higher levels. On the other hand, there would be a new Chosen One appearing every day. This situation seemed to have become a habit in the evolution of the continent. The natives of the continent had long been used to the arrival of the Chosen One. From the beginning, the natives and the Chosen One had an equal relationship. Now, though a Chosen One was a privileged class, other than the natural power of the countries and nobles, the commoners were still commoners. Now, more and more Chosen One were born on the continent. Correspondingly, the Chosen One began to form groups. At first, the Chosen One only appeared in the form of armies and took on large-scale missions from various countries. But just before the continent was divided and changed, the first Chosen One country appeared. The one who founded the first Chosen One country and became the first Chosen One king was a demon. It was said that the demon's original form was a slime called Roger. But so far, no one had seen the true face of the Demon King Roger. But the Demon King City, created by the Demon King Roger, had always been infamous among the Chosen One. In the beginning, it absorbed many Chosen One, who were also born as demons, and then made laws in an attempt to rule all the born Chosen One. This kind of behavior eventually aroused the rage of all the Chosen One around the world. Finally, the punitive army led by the strongest human Chosen One alliance entered the Demon King City. Before the arrival of the Evil Dragon era, the strongest human Chosen One alliance, Blue Sky Sword Saint Qianxiu, fought the Demon King Roger alone and successfully killed the Demon King in the abyss of hell. Then, the Demon King City fell. The Demon King City, which once ruled a large area of the mainland, collapsed, and the Demon Chosen One went into hiding and scattered all over the mainland. Since then, the Human Chosen One Alliance established the Holy Kingdom and elected the first Holy King. As for the strongest person in the alliance, a Blue Sky Sword Saint Qianxiu, he and his wife lived in seclusion and disappeared from the sight of the people on the mainland. Of course, although the Blue Sky Sword Saint disappeared from the eyes of the people, he did not disappear from the sight of the Chosen One. The Blue Sky Sword Saint couple was still active in the frontline team, exploring the upper level of the mainland, and they were far ahead of the other human Chosen One. Legend. It was just a legend. The strongest person in the alliance might not be Blue Sky Sword Saint Qian Xiu, but his wife, Blue Sky Saintess, Thousand Delicate Feathers. It was said that Blue Sky Saintess was the reincarnation of a true god. She was born with God's treasure, and there were countless divine items in it. That was why the Blue Sky Sword Saint was so powerful. After all, when the human chosen one was still working hard to get blue equipment, the Blue Sky Sword Saint couple was already full of divine equipment. The speed at which you cut him down was not as fast as his automatic recovery speed. The power of a normal attack was more powerful than your big move after various buffs. It seems that I took advantage of a loophole. After briefly browsing the historical process in the Jade Fantasy mainland, Boss Luo couldn't help but smile slightly. When he first created this game, he didn't expect it to develop to the current scale. It could be said that it was a playful attempt. Therefore, there were many things that he didn't think carefully in the beginning. After all, there were still very few players who could charge tens of millions of yuan into the game at once. Among these players, there was only one girl who could give up her life for love when she logged into the Jade Fantasy mainland in the beginning. In fact, Boss Luo had also discussed with Miss Maid whether the existence of such a bug was not good. Miss Maid gave a direct opinion. Even in the modern world, some people were already standing at the finish line when they were born. What Miss Maid said was naturally not a problem. Boss Luo continued to read the chatter on the World Channel. With a basket in one hand and a fishing rod in the other, the little level 4 mage walked leisurely on the way to a lake in the novice village to fish. Stop! At this moment, 2 armed men with black and white skin appeared in front of him. They blocked in front of the little mage. By the way, Boss Luo's alternate account name was really Little Mage. What's the matter? Boss Luo blinked his eyes. The Caucasian man among the 2 armed men said in a deep voice, "You can't go in there. This is private territory. Outsiders are not allowed to enter." Boss Luo was stunned. Private territory? The black warrior snorted and said, "Where did this idiot come from? This is the mysterious lake that witnessed the love between Azure Sky Sword Saint and Azure Sky Saintess. This is the irreplaceable territory that Azure Sky Sword Saint obtained after he passed the unique mission. It is protected by the laws of the gods. Didn't you learn about this in school?" Boss Luo opened his mouth. So it was like this. Chapter 1580. There was such a legend that in the Human Major Alliance, the most powerful Azure Sky Sword Sage of the Holy Kingdom and Azure Sky Saintess were so happy because of the blessings of the lake spirits outside the novice village. Of course, it was just a legend, but even if someone asked the Azure Sky Sword Sage couple about this question, the final answer was only a thought-provoking smile. But no matter what the truth was, this area of the novice village was indeed the private territory of the Azure Sky Sword Sage at a huge cost. This was the novice village's territory. It was a place protected by the gods, so powerful monsters could not invade at all. This was to ensure that the newly born chosen one could have a safe growth environment. Therefore, all the novice villages on the mainland did not belong to any forces. It was absolutely neutral. But the Azure Sky Sword Sage was the only player who legally occupied the novice village's territory. What secrets were hidden in this naturally attracted the attention of countless people. Every day, countless fearless, chosen one wanted to sneak into this territory to explore the secrets of the Azure Sky Sword Sage couple. Because she really didn't care about the harassment, the Azure Sky Saintess spent a lot of money to hire an entire chosen one corps to be stationed around this lake for a long time in addition to the various defenses provided after the territory was legalized. Boss Luo never thought that Qian Xiu would attach so much importance to this place, but he wasn't too touched in his heart. But he was still in a good mood because he unexpectedly encountered such a wonderful thing. "You're still laughing? What's so funny?" The white warrior frowned at this time. "You're a rookie. Don't always think that you're lucky. You can find treasures in the novice village. You should go and kill the chickens in the novice village to level up. Don't come here again. Next time, you won't be so lucky to meet us. If you encounter other irritable guys in our corps, they might beat you up without saying anything. Boss Luo pondered for a moment. He suddenly remembered an interesting thing that Miss Maid once told him when she was designing the map of the entire mainland. The general idea was why the chickens in the novice village were so easy to kill. Moreover, they often provided a lot of experience, allowing the novice to level up quickly and so on. Therefore, there was this setting: when a new, chosen one killed more than a certain number of chickens in the novice village, they would attract the hostility of all the chickens in the village. The chosen one, who was marked with the hatred of all the chickens, would be attacked by countless chicken monsters in the novice village, until he was pecked to death by chickens. Is it okay to kill chickens now? Boss Luo couldn't help but ask curiously. What's wrong with killing a chicken? The black warrior beside him couldn't help but frown. Boss Luo smiled slightly. It seemed that no one would be so bored as to kill chickens until they reached the maximum limit set by the system, only to be pecked to death by a chicken. Nothing. Boss Luo shook his head. Since this is private property, then I won't go in. Thank you for guarding this place. This is a fruit that I picked on the way here. If you don't mind, you can use it to quench your thirst. The system identified that it was indeed a normal fruit, but it had the function of quenching thirst and was not poisonous. As the saying went, don't hit a smiling person. Seeing that this little mage was so friendly, the black and white warrior's expressions softened. There's no need for the fruit. You can take it. The white warrior shook his head and said, We're still on duty. If there's nothing else, please leave quickly. Is there any place nearby where I can fish? Boss Luo immediately asked. Over there. Walk forward for 10 kilometers and there's a small lake. If you want to do a fishing mission, you can go there. The black warrior pointed in a direction and said, Basically, all the newbies from the village go to that lake to do a fishing mission. This is for you. It can help you get a good position. As he spoke, the black warrior threw a token to Luochio. He also didn't want the fruit, but he liked this little mage's friendliness. High-level players like him had plenty of tokens like this. He gave it to him because he liked his friendliness. Thank you. Boss Luo casually took the token and put down the bag with the fruit. We'll meet again if we're fated. Just like that, he left under the surprised gaze of the black and white warriors. What a strange guy. The white warrior shook his head and then suddenly remembered something. This little mage is only level 4, right? How did he come here through the forest? This is the advanced field of the novice village. Any wild monster can kill him instantly. I don't know. It's quite sweet. The black warrior shook his head and picked up a fruit to eat. Not long after, a golden light suddenly flashed across the sky, directly flying towards this place. But the strange thing was, in this private territory where flying was prohibited, the appearance of this golden light did not trigger the territory's alarm. The golden light shot directly into the center of the territory. That seems to be the divine beast mount of Azure Sky Saintus, Unicorn Pegasus? The white warrior subconsciously froze. The black warrior quickly said, It doesn't seem to be. It's them. Did they come back from the front lines? The two suddenly shivered and quickly entered the territory. Azure Sky Sword Sage and Azure Sky Saintus were the strongest experts in the human alliance. They dominated the rankings all year round and were unfathomable existences that left the third place far behind. They held the record of the exploration progress of the upper echelons of the continent. There were countless legends about them. Although this was the territory of a novice village and there weren't any additional benefits, when the Azure Sky Saintus was bidding, there were still a large number of legions that wanted to win the bid. Because of this, there was a big commotion. The white warrior said in a low voice, To see our idols. The black warrior nodded and echoed, To see our idols. The unicorn Pegasus that represented holiness slowly descended. On top of the unicorn Pegasus were the Azure Sky Sword Sage and the Azure Sky Saintess of the Great Alliance. At this time, the soldiers stationed in the camp walked out one after another. Discipline. Because of the arrival of the legends of the Great Alliance, the commotion in the camp quickly attracted the dissatisfaction of the Legion commanders who were training in the training field. The Legion commander of the Dragon Blood Legion, Tyrannical Song 10086, strode out and shouted at the excited members of the Legion. Not good. All of you, run 100 laps around the camp with 3 times the weight. Tyrannical Song 10086, the Legion commander, had always been strict with military orders. As soon as he gave the order, the members of the Legion had bitter expressions on their faces, but they didn't dare to disobey the orders of the Legion commander, so they reluctantly began to carry the weight. Old song, they didn't do anything wrong. On the unicorn Pegasus, a figure turned over and landed, followed by another. Qian Xiu and 1,000 delicate feathers came together at this time. The legendary couple of the Great Alliance did not wear their usual divine attire, just ordinary clothes, but they looked in a hurry. You don't know this group of little bastards, I have to teach them a lesson. Tyrannical Song 10086 shook his head, and immediately said, Weren't you two exploring the front line of the upper level? Why did you suddenly come back? This exploration activity shouldn't be over yet. Did something happen? Qian Xiu and 1,000 delicate feathers looked at each other, and Qian Xiu shook his head. Nothing happened. The Exploration Corps at the front line is now having a battle meeting, but we have some personal matters, so we came back specially. Tyrannical Song 10086 heard this and couldn't help but open his mouth. Probably only this immortal couple can be so willful, right? They left the Frontline Exploration Corps' battle meeting early just like that. He shook his head with a wry smile. Thinking of the distance between the front line and here, he couldn't help but say helplessly, You two can't have used instant teleportation to come back, right? 1,000 delicate feathers said directly, That thing can't cross levels. We used the god's teleportation scroll, which saves a lot of trouble. Tyrannical Song 10086 opened his mouth again. God's teleportation scroll. How many of them are there in the entire Holy Kingdom? This woman is really a prodigal woman. What can make you two miss the frontline battle meeting and use the god's teleportation scroll to come back? What is it? Tyrannical Song 10086 still felt the seriousness of the matter. Looking for someone, Qian Xiu said directly, and then asked, Old Song, did anyone come here just now? Someone? Who is it? Tyrannical Song 10086 was stunned. Qian Xiu thought for a while and said, A mage, very young. Well, his level is very low, about level 4. I don't remember what he looks like, but as long as I see him, he's the kind of person who wants to be friends with him. Has he been here before? Level 4? I haven't seen him before. Tyrannical Song 10086 shook his head and said in amusement, however, How can a little mage of level 4 come to this place? The monsters outside your territory are at least level 20. Is that the ceiling of the novice village? No. Qian Xiu couldn't help but sigh. Looking at his wife, 1,000 delicate feathers, he couldn't help but show a disappointed expression. It stands to reason that you, the Azure Sky Sword Sage, can't find the person you want with just a few words? Could Tyrannical Song 10086 asked puzzledly, Why, don't you have the other party's friend list? No. Qian Xiu shook his head. He didn't agree to my application. Forget it, he shouldn't have left yet. I'll walk around nearby. Didn't add him? What is the origin of this little mage of level 4? He can even refuse the Azure Sky Sword Sage's invitation? Tyrannical Song 10086 suddenly widened his eyes, and the curiosity in his heart was completely aroused. Qian Xiu, who is this person? Why do you and your wife value him so much? It's not important to you. But Qian Xiu didn't want to say more. He just waved his hand, let the Pegasus in the sky land, and prepared to leave. Idle. Idle. Wait, don't go yet. 2 warriors, one black and one white, hurriedly rushed into the camp at this time. Tyrannical Song 10086 saw this, looked at the 2 people rushing over, and waved his arm to stop them. The 2 warriors, black and white, instantly fell to the ground as if they had hit an iron wall. They were in great pain. You two, why didn't you stand guard outside? What are you doing here? The Tyrannical Song 10086 said angrily. Do you know what the crime is for leaving your post without permission? The white warrior quickly said, I don't care, I want to see my idol. Even if you are the commander of the army, you can't stop me from seeing my idol. The black warrior was obviously calmer, but he wasn't that calm. Commander, don't worry, nothing happened outside. Today, except for a rookie mage who came to touch the door stupidly, we didn't see anything else. I just want to say a few words to the sword sage. You too. Tyrannical Song 10086 gritted his teeth and was about to curse. What did you just say? A figure rushed over in an instant. You too, say it again. Who came to touch the door? Qian Xiu, the strongest person in the Great Alliance. The white warrior and the black warrior were stunned. After looking at each other, the white warrior said cautiously, It's a very ordinary little mage. He said that he wanted to come to the territory to fish, but we sent him away. He should have gone to the small lake in the back mountain to fish. Name? I think he's called Little Mage. Sure enough. Qian Xiu sighed heavily. At this time, Qian Xianro also looked over. The excitement in their eyes was obvious. This made Tyrannical Song 10086 finally unable to help the curiosity in his heart. He subconsciously asked, Qian Xiu, who is this little mage? Why are you two? Benefactor. Qian Xiu took a deep breath and said, He is our biggest benefactor in our lives. We can't repay his kindness in our lives. The legend of the Great Alliance left. After hurrying over, he rode the Pegasus from the ground and flew to the back mountain of the novice village. The white warrior and the black warrior sat on the ground in a daze. Tyrannical Song 10086 forgot to teach these 2 guys who left their post a lesson. The white warrior, ah hey, did we just miss something? The black warrior, it seems to be, bye. The white warrior, F*ck. I drove away the benefactor of the sword sage? The black warrior, it's us. When the Pegasus landed, everyone around the small lake in the back mountain raised their heads. But the golden light of the Pegasus was so strong that these new players couldn't open their eyes at all. It was commonly known as blinding. After this golden light circled around the small lake, it suddenly flew down. That was the high-level area of the small lake, which was generally only for the high-level players of the novice village who practiced life skills from the beginning. The new players could only look at the platform in the center of the lake across the shore at this time, not knowing what happened. In the center of the lake, Qian Xiu and Qian Xianro jumped down directly. They saw a person sitting quietly on the edge of the platform, holding a fishing rod in his hand. The surroundings were so quiet that people could calm down subconsciously. Benefactor, Qian Xiu called in a low voice. The fish mark on the calm lake suddenly shook. Boss Luo turned his head and saw the Lan siblings. He was a little surprised and said casually, It's you. Long time no see. It's really you. Benefactor. Qian Xiu and Thousand Delicate Feathers walked over quickly, hand in hand. I finally see you again, Benefactor. Boss Luo was quite curious, Benefactor. Qian Xiu glanced at his wife, then nodded and said seriously, Yes, Benefactor. Do you still remember the Golden Carp King mission that you transferred to us? It seems that there is such a thing. Boss Luo nodded. Qian Xiu continued, because of this mission, we got a map, and because of this map, we entered a mysterious room. There, we got the most precious thing in our lives. With that said, 1,000 delicate feathers held a crystal in both hands and slowly put it on the ground. The crystal shone, and a small figure could be vaguely seen in the crystal. It was a child in the infant state. 1,000 delicate feathers said softly at this time, this child was created from a blueprint we got after killing the boss in that room. It was created using my and Qian Xiu's data. This is the most precious gift for Qian Xiu and me. So, thank you. The most powerful couple in the League of Legends slowly knelt down at this time. If you didn't transfer the mission, we wouldn't have gotten this opportunity, so... 1,000 delicate feathers whispered, it's you who made my and my husband's lives complete. Hashtag PS. 560 seconds. Chapter 1581. The little life in the crystal ball had a weak breathing movement. It was a miraculous life that could only be born in this fantasy world. This child looks very healthy. Boss Luo looked carefully and said with a smile. Yes. 1,000 delicate feathers held the crystal ball in her arms and said softly, every day I take good care of her. Do you have a name? Boss Luo asked casually. Qian Xiu shook his head. I haven't thought about it yet. I don't want this kind of thing to happen casually. I just don't know when this child will be born. The incubation progress bar has hardly moved recently. Luoqiu said, don't worry. Normal people also need to be pregnant for 10 months. 1,000 delicate feathers nodded in agreement. I'm not in a hurry. It's the happiest thing to watch this child grow up bit by bit every day. It's just that Qian Xiu seems to be eager for her to come out immediately. Oh my god, this is not forging equipment. Although this was a humanoid pet made through drawings, he must love her very much. So, he just smiled foolishly. He didn't know where to put his hands. He didn't dare to be rude or say anything. He was like a child. How did Mr. Qian Xiu know that I am here? You didn't add me as a friend. Qian Xiu said directly, however, have you forgotten that you once transferred the task to me? In the social interface, you have always been in the stranger column. I didn't want to clear it. I have to see if you are online every day. I see. Boss Luo nodded and then said, I don't play often. I just come here occasionally to take a look. Qian Xiu and 1,000 delicate feathers glanced at each other. There was a tacit understanding between them that no one else had. As one of the first players to enter the game, there was still a fundamental difference between players in this game. The difference was whether they were players in the game or players outside the game. Basically, every player in the game would silently abide by an unwritten rule. That was, they absolutely did not want players outside the game to reveal the truth that they were real people who logged into the game. In the eyes of Qian Xiu and 1,000 delicate feathers, this little mage must be a player outside the game. If he was a chosen one on the mainland, he would only be online all the time. Only players outside the game would go offline. For example, the couple's other good friend, Xiao Bao. Generally speaking, the players in the game would gradually cut off contact with the players outside of the game and only interact with their own kind. This would effectively prevent this secret from being exposed. After all, the players in the game were not born here because they were persecuted or threatened. They came to this game of their own free will and had no intention of leaving. Qian Xiu had been keeping in touch with Xiao Bao. Basically, he just wanted to know what happened in the real world through Xiao Bao. But in fact, he rarely took the initiative to contact Xiao Bao recently. As for Xiao Bao, it seemed that because of work, he spent less and less time online. This was a stage that a normal player would inevitably experience. Qian Xiu used to rely on the game for a living for a period of time, so he could naturally take it lightly. Is it because of work? Thousand Delicate Feathers asked. Boss Luo nodded with a smile. Part of it is because of work. This. Thousand Delicate Feathers thought for a while, then glanced at her husband, Qian Xiu, and continued, This is the case. Qian Xiu and I have been thinking about how to thank you if we can meet you again. Although I transferred the mission to you, you are the ones who completed it. Boss Luo shook his head. In fact, it has little to do with me. If you can remember me, it is a very good gift for me. This won't do. Qian Xiu shook his head. In your opinion, it may be a small mission, but in my and yours opinion, the last thing we get is, you won't understand what special meaning this has for us. So, please give me a chance to thank you. Boss Luo thought for a while. He also wanted to know what the other party was going to do, and, what do you want to do? Qian Xiu was overjoyed, and then said directly, the things we can thank you for can only be realized in this game. In fact, I have been thinking for a long time. You should be a player who lives a leisurely life, right? Although you only live a leisurely life, you still need to have the necessary level. After all, some places with good scenery also require a corresponding level to enter. So? Boss Luo blinked. He seemed to have figured out what the other party wanted to do. Sure enough. If you don't mind, Thousand Delicate Feathers said, can you leave the time today to us? Before you go offline, we will help you level up. We will go to the forefront, where the monsters have the most experience. If you team up with us, all the experience and income will belong to you. Boss Luo opened his mouth, and then fell into deep thought. And most of the content of this game, even many hidden levels, and the plot were designed by Miss Maid. Speaking of which, Boss Luo really didn't seem to have experienced other content of this game, such as fighting, exploring, clearing, and so on. In addition, the pass that he gave to Caesar at the beginning, Caesar should have been secretly using it. A group of orcs also logged in. They lived in the Orc King city on the mainland. It seemed that he could go and take a look. If you don't like these, we will think about it again. Qian Xiu looked at him with some apprehension at this time. He was really anxious like an ant on a hot pan. He wanted to thank this little mage, but the other party was a player outside the game. They were always separated by a world. What he could give was only what he had in the game. No. Boss Luo smiled and said, in this case, I will have to trouble you too. Dark circles, red blood, instant noodles, ham sausages, potato chips, empty bottles of happy drinks, and ashtrays stuffed with cigarette butt. It felt like the computer screen had been brushed with a thin layer of tar. A certain Shinryu from Kelowna was squatting on the chair at this time. Her fingers were flying. She was crazily attacking Kelowna's Shinryu on the chat interface on the screen. She was scolding a poison healer who formed a temporary team. On the sofa, little butterfly monster was sleeping soundly. In order to provide various resources for Sister Long's, your man doesn't want you, the young little butterfly monster was forced to open nearly 50 alternate accounts. She carried bricks from morning to night without any salary. I will destroy this game. My mind is not clear. That little bitch actually slandered me like this. This was her Sister Long's original words. The sound of typing on the keyboard soon woke little butterfly monster up. Luo Dance yawned, rubbed her eyes, and came to Long Shirua's side. Sister Long, are you still farming here? What kind of broken game is this? Why is the leveling speed so slow? And why can't I find the entrance to pay for the game? I want to earn 99 points in one hit. Luo Dance shook her head. If she could pay for the game, she wouldn't be forced to open 50 alternate accounts. Sister Long, I'm going to open an alternate account to do the daily routine. Luo Dance took a bottle of happy water and drank it. Both of them were drinking it recently. No need. Long Shirua continued scolding while typing with her feet. She lit a cigarette and smoked. I'll go to the front line to gain experience and level up. Luo Dance blinked. The front line? How can you go there? Your mage account is so low level that no raid team wants you. Long Shirua looked like she had a well-thought-out plan. Humph. You don't know this, do you? I've greeted the guys from the administration. They have a team in the front line and there are a lot of them. I said, add one more person. The little butterfly monster was stunned for a moment, then could only bitterly smile. This Sister Long's obsession was really deep. She would do anything to level up. He remembered that in the beginning, because it was convenient to kill chickens in the novice village and the experience was very fast, he slaughtered all the chickens in the novice village 3 times. In the end, for some reason, he angered the novice village's chicken god and attracted countless chicken monsters. The game account of the great Kelowna Shinryu was pecked to death by chickens. The anger of the chicken god didn't disappear until her account was pecked back to level 0. Is the hospital still closed today? Butterfly Monster couldn't help but ask. The hospital had been closed for 2 weeks. Sister Long is probably going to be crippled. No, Kelowna Shinryu said without thinking. You go to feed Wonkai and play by yourself. I'll give you a day off today. Luo Dance was so happy that she jumped up. Today, she could finally review her lessons. By the way, Wonkai was the golden dragon Fafnir. It was in the form of a dog, so Fafnir was really fed. Because the last golden dragon in the west was tied up in the backyard of the hospital by Kelowna Shinryu after returning to the pet hospital. Originally, Kelowna Shinryu wasn't so mean. However, since Fafnir was admitted to the hospital, he tried to escape from the city every day. After a while, the Shinryu Kelowna Shinryu was so annoyed that he tied Fafnir up and named him Wonkai. As for how to turn Fafnir into a dog in this city that forbade magic? It was simple, only this city forbade magic. Kelowna Shinryu took a taxi and went out. When he came back, the golden dragon was tied up. Woof 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 woof. Be good, Wonkai. Eat your food obediently. I want to go. Bye-bye. Woof woof, Jade Fantasy. The front line of the continent, the 3rd floor of God Bless Canyon. Froggy, Froggy, what are you thinking about? A shield warrior patted the shoulder of a swordsman who was sitting by the river in a daze, and then sat down. After being patted on the shoulder, the swordsman named Frog shook his head and said calmly, Nothing. I was just thinking that we have been here for a while, but we haven't found a way to leave yet. We entered the game world to find the internet ghost, but now it seems that everything is not that simple. The shield warrior beside him became silent. Like Froggy, he had been sucked in by the game. Moreover, unlike most of the so-called chosen ones who had entered voluntarily, they had entered with a certain purpose, because they were special service members of the Shenzhou administration. A total of 32 special service members of the Shenzhou administration successfully entered the game. With the help of the administration outside, they quickly formed a powerful combat force and were active in the front line and the Human Alliance in the form of a regiment. Don't worry, the people in the administration will definitely find a way to save us. The shield warrior sighed and comforted. They will definitely find a way. Not long ago, during the Mount Tai incident, many elites in the administration, including the seniors of the Kelowna Taoist demons, were trapped in a special dimension for almost half a month? Didn't they succeed in the end? That's right. Froggy sighed and then suddenly said in a low voice, What do you think of this world? What do you mean, what do I think? The shield warrior frowned. Froggy said, You see, everything we see and encounter on this continent is so real. Or in other words, it's the real thing. In the past, we didn't feel anything when we looked at the NPCs in the game through the screen. But now, when you interact with these NPCs again, can you still treat them as pure data? They, like us, have feelings, anger, sorrow, and joy. They will grow up, and they will grow old. Froggy, don't overthink. We don't belong here. The shield warrior took a deep breath and said, Our home is outside. Our family is outside. No matter how real this world is, it's just a game world. At this moment, a beautiful figure slowly walked over from the riverside. It was a young girl with a sweet smile. Sir Froggy. The young girl waved her hand and ran over happily. Hearing this, Froggy's body moved slightly. The shield warrior beside him sighed and patted his companion's shoulder again. Remember, you have a mission and you don't belong here. This little girl is just a pile of data. Froggy was silent. Don't talk for too long. The shield warrior shook his head and stood up. Later, a smurf will come. The higher-up said that we don't need to do anything today. We just need to focus on leveling up with this smurf. Froggy was stunned. Could it be that someone was sucked in here again? The shield warrior shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. The higher-ups said not to ask anything. Just focus on leveling up, the faster the better. Mission? Froggy frowned, feeling that this word was particularly harsh. The higher-ups, they were already deeply trapped in this world, but why? Why did they have to listen to those guys when they were clearly separated by a world? They risked their lives to attack those dangerous places. And the higher-ups just sat in front of the chair and looked at themselves on the screen.